Good evening, chat. Hello. Yes, we were a little late, but I was busy. Somebody I was talking to, we kind of were just chopping it up, as the kids say nowadays. I don't know. They still say that. I don't really care. Anyways, welcome to the show, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. It's the judiciary running amok. The coup, the judicial coup, as it were. That's what we're addressing tonight. We're addressing it with two separate SCOTUS cases. And I think they kind of go hand in hand. It's very ironic how you get, one justice speaking out of their mouth one day, and then the next day they're like, oh, wait, I didn't mean that. And we're going to get to that. So welcome to the show, everybody. My name is Sean, someone's potentially criminal, an attorney over in the Cleveland, Ohio area. I want to welcome you guys. We are going to get to this. But first, I want to introduce my guest tonight. My guest tonight is an attorney. He's actually been there, done that, got the t-shirt, been involved in litigation up to the Supreme Court. Very knowledgeable, very experienced. Also, previously was a teacher of Churdlin. He was helping get those skulls full of mush, learning things out there. So he's got a very well-rounded, I think, life experience and, base he could draw from. And I got a lot to say. I think that's pretty good out there. And as SB Sellers says, yes, this guy has been on with Destiny. While he's debated Destiny, Destiny's only called me a penny lawyer. So he's definitely got a little bit more bona fides than me. But anyways, I want to bring you guys, bring in Ryan Mullally, and I want to say hi to Ryan. How you doing, Ryan?
Hey, Sean, thanks for having me on. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Did I do you justice, or is there anything else you wanted to include?
No, absolutely. I appreciate the intro, and I'm desperately trying to figure out how to do this internet conversation thing better. So you can find me on X as shown on the screen. Thanks for that. And hopefully I'll be recording something and posting it on YouTube at Natural Law. But as I'm sure you know, Sean, for us lawyers, technology is anathema. So
Yes.
I'm not positive my Luddite ways will work, but I'm giving it my best shot.
Well, I mean, it's really the worst for the boomer lawyers, but yes, we suffer as well. I mean, we do, but not as bad as other attorneys. Although when they go away, because I've noticed this when I go to court, I'm like even them are getting better at technology, and I'm like, oh God, it's like eventually I'm going to be falling behind. So I get worried about this.
There's a running joke in the legal industry that if you really want to break a lawyer's brain, you tell them to open Excel.
Yes.
Most lawyers are like Microsoft Word, Westlaw only.
Yes.
Those are the two platforms that are allowed.
I'm really good at Excel because I can make like the little borders and I could color in the boxes. It's really like my fiance, she uses Excel and she could do all the formulas and stuff. And I'm like, I know Excel too. And she's like, really? I'm like, yeah, I could make like colors and the headings, and I could take the thing and move it to the center of the column. And she just stared at me.
I mean, that's light years ahead of the average attorney. So
yes.
props.
Yeah. And Zero Folks, just want to say Ryan is cool. He's I'm currently working on an edit for him right now.
And I am very appreciative of that. Thank you. See my Luddite comments earlier. I'm working on it. I'm trying to get better, but I really thank you for that. I really appreciate it, buddy.
Yes. Yes, I did bring a friend tonight. Guys. Yes, and somebody else commented, finally a competent lawyer on the show. I know. It's hard to find them.
Your chat's brutal.
They are. They're tough, but they keep me on my toes. It's as I say, it's a personal hell, and I built it myself. So that's the interesting part. Myself. So let's see here. Making sure I didn't miss anything else. Real quick. Zero Fuck says, member 16 months. Okay. Thank you for 16 months, by the way. Support. With Vince McMahon going, yes. Just spilling that money. Tell Ryan I'm still working on his edit. Well, Ryan, he's still working on your edit.
Thank you so much.
We'll get to it at some point. All right. So I guess we're gonna get to the big stuff here, and I guess we'll get into it where it's fun is the case of Trump v. Casa. Which I think at the time was Casa v. Trump. Either way, it was the birthright citizenship case. And Chad, I know we covered it. We listened to the oral arguments. And ultimately, yes, the case was about birthright citizenship at its basic level. But what the Supreme Court really wanted to address was the issue of the nationwide injunctions and the fact there's been like a million of them at this point. every judge wants to do an injunction. It seems like it's the hot new thing. Every judge files an injunction, and it's not just the DC district anymore. I mean, that I will say is the interesting part about the lawfare is we know of so many judges on the DC district, and it's not even just the lawfare, but like the January 6th stuff. We know so many of their names, and it's like the only district in America where like, unless you're a lawyer, any of the judges on that district. And I think it's very interesting in that regard.
Well, I mean, forum shopping is a real concern. And for the non-lawyers here, forum shopping is our kind of like term of art for when you pick the location where you think you're going to get a good draw on the judge.
Yes.
And, you're seeing in this Trump term, almost all the injunction cases came out of New York, Massachusetts, or DC, because that's where the sympathetic benches are. And in Biden's term, the injunctions were coming out of Texas, Florida, where the sympathetic judges are. And, part of the problem that poses is, is it really a good system where clever lawyers are picking where to sue and using that to stop the democratically elected president's policies from going into effect?
Yes.
That's kind of the policy considerations, but truthfully, I mean, I thought Justice Barrett wrote a masterful opinion, and what I thought was great about it is that she avoided the policy at all. She just talked about the law, which is, I think, what judges should do.
Yes. Now, the one thing I did want to mention too is, you guys, it's not just finding the right district court, but it's knowing the schedule of the judge who's the off-duty judge, because in all these courts, they have a judge who's the one they're the one on call. They've got the on-call phone after hours, and they know the on-call schedule. And you find which judge, especially in the on-call schedule, you want to hit up. And then you say, oh, well, I tried the on-call judge. You know what? I couldn't get a hold of him, so I went to the chief judge for that district. And that was, for Boasberg. That happened a couple of times. You're like, well, we tried the on-call guy, and he wasn't there, so we called Boasberg at like 2:30 in the morning, and he happened to just be up. And by golly, we ended up with an injunction by 7 a.m. and it was like, yay. And you're like, yeah, that's interesting how that worked out.
Yeah,
I would love to see the phone calls and text between those groups.
Yeah, local attorneys know how to massage their system. Like I clerked in the Southern District of New York, and there's the schedule rotates. So there's a judge who's in charge of TROs, temporary restraining orders, and preliminary relief, for each window of time, so that there's always somebody there. So if you know that schedule, and you're not time sensitive with your lawsuit, that can impact when you would file a lawsuit if you're seeking preliminary relief, and that varies from district to district. So yeah, I mean, savvy local attorneys do know how to use the system, not to guarantee that they get the judge they want, but to increase their probabilities for sure.
Well, and I was going to say, I am not above admitting that when I've been involved in things, and I haven't done a lot of federal stuff. I really haven't done any federal stuff, but a lot of local things where you have a court where there's multiple judges, which judge, happens to be the judge who's clearing all the warrants that week, or has the cattle call docket. And you're like, oh, wait, who's in this week? And you tell your client, like, no, turn around, come back Monday. We're not doing this today. We're waiting till next week. That happens. It's not uncommon. It's one thing where you're helping out like your one client, or you're trying to, massage things around a little bit. Like, I got a protection order, a restraining order I want heard, and I know which magistrate's on duty, and we're trying to work it around. That's one thing. I think when you're getting to the level of we're affecting nationwide discourse, though, I think you're getting in a little, like, I think the impropriety gets a little bit more, and that's, but then again, though, if I had those advantages, I mean, like you said, if we know how to work those systems, you're going to work those systems. I mean,
lawyers are going to use whatever tools are available. Right?
Yeah.
You can't fault them for that. But and I went back and forth on the policy on the universal injunction question. I'll be honest. Like, I think the last time I talked about it was with Pisco, and I had some trepidations about it being eliminated because, back in the Biden administration, for example, I've been on record as being really opposed to using OSHA to create a vaccine mandate for any company with more than 100 employees, for example, by executive fiat.
Mhm.
And a universal injunction seemed like a valuable tool to check executive overreach. So getting
Mhm.
rid of it, I was antsy about it. I'm not going to lie, but I was
Mhm.
being a really bad originalist.
Yeah.
Because if you read Casa v. Trump and you read Justice Barrett did a just masterful job,
Yeah.
she lays out the law, and the law clearly says that the court should not have this power. And the case she makes
Mhm.
is utterly convincing. And
Mhm.
then she gets to the policy. She says, look, there's policy arguments on both sides, but they don't matter because a court doesn't care about policy when the law is clear. And here the law
Yes.
is clear. And I thought she kind of reminded me how an originalist is supposed to reason. I was getting the cart
Mhm.
before the horse. Like my policy preferences are not the issue. The question is,
Yeah.
did Congress authorize the
Mhm.
court to do this? And they did not.
Mhm. No, I agree, and it's not even just going back to the OSHA stuff, but even more recently, they cite and it's something I kept covering, was the Corporate Transparency Act stuff
Mhm.
with the business registrations, and the idea that every corporation in America, just every LLC in America had to register with the federal government. That was subject to nationwide injunctions out of a court in Texas, and as you said, finding somebody that was sympathetic to that. And yeah, at the time you're like, that sounds great, it sounds groovy. But I will say, I do think even Clarence Thomas admits this in Casa, and we're going to go through it a little bit, guys. He says there are times where a nationwide injunction probably does make sense. He said he doesn't disfavor him completely, but I think when you're getting to the point of citizens being forced to, you know, this thing is permeating every aspect of our society, and it's affecting everyone. I think that's the time where you probably do need, like, if you can show something. I don't think that's against the originalist idea, because it truly was. It permeated everything. It fundamentally altered everything. I think that was important here. But when it comes to what we're going to talk about today, yeah, it's very limited in scope, and the people who wanted their remedy can get their remedy. And
Yeah,
I
that's
think that's
exactly right. I mean,
yeah.
what the court said is that now you have to, if you claim to be representing the country
Mhm.
on this question,
Yeah.
you need to make a showing that there is a class of people like
Mhm.
you who are seeking relief, which you can
Mhm.
do. There are mechanisms. Is it
Yeah.
more burdensome? Absolutely. But maybe it should be a bit more burdensome to enjoin the
Mhm.
federal government from enacting policy. Maybe it shouldn't be, one person shows up at court and says, I don't like this, and therefore it can't happen.
Yes.
That,
Yeah.
but again, the policy back and forth
Mhm.
is fascinating, but ultimately not why Barrett came out the way she did for the majority. She came out, she said, well,
Yes.
the only question was, did Congress give the court this equitable power? It
Mhm.
did not. And that's the
Mhm.
end of the analysis, really. I mean, there's no,
Yeah.
what more could you ask? The court does
Mhm.
not have this power.
Yeah. And real quick, so you guys understand, and I know I've mentioned this before on the show. When it comes to the issues of like equity and what's an injunction is merely an equitable remedy. And equity is it basically, and I know this is going to be very simplified, Ryan, but when you think of how you can receive a remedy at law, it's going to be either you're going to get damages, you're going to get some money out of it, you're going to get a ruling saying you were right. And when you get to remedies and equity, it's about remedies like, how do we fix the problem? And it's about what non-monetarily can we do. So, for example, an injunction like quit dumping radioactive, Mr. Burns can't dump radioactive waste in the river where everybody's swimming. Or, for example, if you have a contract with somebody, and if me and Ryan have a contract and Ryan's supposed to paint my house and I pay him all the money, well, there's some options. Ryan could give me all the money back, or he could perform the contract. And there are times where, depending on how things have gone, Ryan may have to perform that contract because he's the only guy that can do it. So there are times where that's not a remedy at law, that's a remedy in equity. And it's like, what's the fairest way to handle this? Because we don't necessarily have a way to address it at law sometimes. So that's where equity and law are separate things. Nowadays here in America, they are one and the same, except for I think in Louisiana and Delaware, I think are the only two places where they have separate courts for equity and separate courts for law. In the rest of America, you're going to find it in one judge.
Yeah, and just to complete the history lesson,
Mhm.
our courts are kind of historically an extension of England's legal system. And
Yeah.
historically in England, courts of law and courts of equity were separate.
Mhm.
So
Oh,
if someone breached
Tennessee
a
too.
contract, you had to go and sue in law to get contract damages. Or if someone broke the law and they owed you a fine as dictated by statute, you go to the court of law. And then if somebody was dumping waste on your property and you just want an order for something fair to happen, like they need to clean it up, you go to the court of equity. And it was a really inconvenient system. As you can imagine, having it split is a nightmare, and it kind of made the law a minefield. So in the late 1700s, when the federal courts were founded, Congress combined the federal courts, their courts of law and equity.
Yes.
But when they did that, and this was the issue in CASA, they only granted the courts the powers that a court in equity would have had at that time.
Yes.
Circa 1800, slightly beforehand. So if a court in 1800 would not have had this power, a court today does not have this equitable power. And a universal injunction would have been unheard of at that time period. There is no historic analog.
Well, and this is where we're going to get to, because I'm going to pull up CASA now. Baird brings this up, and there is an historical analogy, and it's something I don't think they focused on. And if you want to call me an idiot for bringing it up, but this is something I think is important. You couldn't get an injunction, they talk about bills of peace and these limitations that are out there. You would not be able to get, you wouldn't be able to enjoin the king. Typically, you were enjoining private parties. So the idea that I could run around and say I want to stop the king from doing something was not something that you were going to get in an English court. You could get against a private party. You guys could band together against someone else. But I think the idea you would be able to get an injunction against the crown or a bill of peace against the crown, I think is kind of like the distinction here, because the government is in a bit of a different position than a regular party. They do have some.
I think that's true in England at that time.
Yeah.
Though, in our system,
Yes.
and this is again, sorry, I'm trying to unlawyer my brain and go back.
Yeah,
and
no, I understand.
Things in layman's terms. In our system, we differentiate between someone in their official capacity and their personal capacity.
Yeah.
So, you can a court can order a public official to cease violating the law. And it doesn't violate sovereign immunity.
That's ex parte Young.
Yeah.
No, and that's true. But I do think the point is, though, just more of the idea that just you can't, just enjoin the government, period. Like you're enjoining this person from doing something. And even if you could, there's no way that some judge in England would say, I hereby prevent the king from doing anything within the realm. I'm like, that just seems a little. That part of it seems a little like, I don't think a judge in England would have had that authority to say you're prohibited from across your realm from acting in a certain way.
And especially not as to the parties before it. As to a total non-party who has not appeared, not related in any way. And for those of you who read Casa v. Trump, there's an issue about the bills of peace, which had some similarities to a broader injunction, but even in a court of England, equity in England, if you were looking for a bill of peace, it would be as to a defined group of people. It's a bill of peace for me and 12 guys, not a bill of peace for everyone in the world, as you were saying, Sean, that the king can take no action. That's not what it would have been.
No, and that's where are we going to here? And sorry, guys. But we do, they do address the bill of peace here. And one of the biggest things that gets to the bill of peace here, and this is something they address, as a general rule, you can't bind people who are not parties to the case. So if you're not involved in it, it doesn't apply to you. And that only makes sense, because I didn't have a chance to litigate. I didn't get notice. I haven't had a chance to be there. It's not fair to me to have to deal with this. I wasn't involved. I didn't even know you guys did this. And to then start holding people to it, well, that, maybe they want to argue a different theory, a different litigation strategy. Although I think probably a lot of the CASA people are probably going to want to argue the same thing. They would still have the, because with the class action, you guys know this is the other way they try to bring stuff up. When you argue a class action, you get that thing in the mail saying you're stuck with this, take it or leave it. And, maybe you don't want that. And that's something, that's the other thing they try to show. This is kind of like a class action is the closest thing. But even then, people have you have to secure the class. Among other things. Sorry, I got a little lost there. I was trying to read chat while
and it's a good point, because to get a class action relief, you would need to prove that the lead plaintiffs are representative and deserve to represent a class of people. So if you wanted to say, for example, all people who are non-citizens who had children within the United States while they were here, you would need to show that your clients adequately represent that group of people.
You would have to find every single one of those people.
Behalf.
Yeah, you would have to show that they all consent to you doing this, because they, like I said, they may not want this. They may want to argue something else.
It's a check against gamesmanship, also, as you're saying, because that means it means the courts have to actually check that the people involved are the right people to represent the group.
Yes, which
I think is fair when you're talking about enjoining the federal government broadly. But again, the policy doesn't really matter at the end of the day, because the law is crystal clear.
Yes. Yeah. And this is just another thing here, guys. This is just another part of what Jackson's talking about here is, allowing everybody subject to a statute to be a party in a lawsuit would it would just make everything impossible. And this is something that they get to in one of the footnotes. I forget which page it's on, but they talk about it with I got my notes, because I actually had guys, 120 pages. I had to read all of it. Where is the footnote? How would this, we don't treat it this way for criminal cases. For example, and this one I think it's very important. Let's see here, page. And guys, don't worry, we'll get to the parts you guys want to laugh at and lol at here in a second. But we're these are very important things that are getting addressed here, and it's here we go.
Is that the Jackson dissent is what you want to laugh at?
Well, my chat really wants to, but they think about what are these positions mean that Jackson's bringing up. The idea that once a single district court deems executive conduct unlawful, it has stated what the law requires. I mean, yes. One judge can determine this. Even the Supreme Court doesn't have that kind of power. Well, I mean, yeah, if you do like an emergency thing, or you go to like an emergency stay or something, but overall, even the Supreme Court doesn't operate with that kind of power. They operate as a consensus. So the Supreme Court, I think, points out, and I don't think they're saying this, but even we don't get to act with such unilateral authority, because ultimately, when it comes to cert, we have to decide as a group whether or not we grant it. One justice saying no doesn't kill it. One justice saying yes doesn't grant it. And they point out here that if the executive has to conform to that view, it'd cease enforcement of the law against anyone anywhere. Well, and they point out that if you're in the District of Alaska and you hold a statute's unconstitutional, can you prosecute somebody in the District of Maryland for it? 100% you can. And I'm sorry, I swear, and you could swear too if you want. But no, they point out that just because one judge somewhere says something, I mean, based on this logic, there was a judge in Kansas recently, a couple months ago, said that the laws against possessing machine guns are unconstitutional. And the guy was running, some gangbanger was running around with a full auto AR-15. Is that the road you really want to go down? Because then it turns into what this judge feels politically and policy wise. That's not the idea of having the rule of law. That turns into the rule of man very quickly too. Given you can go from courtroom to courtroom in a district court and end up with vastly different, rulings.
Yeah, there's a vision of the judiciary that Justice Jackson articulates here in her dissent, and I think I've seen Justice Sotomayor more or less sign on to it by this point. That seems to, I don't even know. I'm not even going to say it's living constitutionalist. It's anti-originalist. It is where originalism is the idea fundamentally, what originalism wants is each branch of government to stay in their lane.
Mm-hmm.
Congress creates law. Judges interpret law. The executive enforces law. And every branch should do what it does.
Yes.
And Justice Jackson's vision seems to be of the judiciary as a supervisory or super branch
Yes.
that has the capacity to almost unilaterally limit and say what the other branches can or cannot do, absent any real restriction. Because if one court can boss the president around based only on equitable authority, there's not a lot of practical limits on that. I mean,
I agree.
But it doesn't seem like there's any guiding principle there.
No, and you also see it though with Sotomayor and Jackson. They both focus on this. 6 judges have already said this is wrong, and it's already been declared unconstitutional. Okay, so they view like, hey, some district court judge said this is wrong, therefore, well, now it must not be legitimate. And I think that's a horrible argument too, because are you saying that you guys are now bound to the arguments and the decisions of a lower court judge? I'm like, that seems like a very, it's a very weird way to abdicate your authority. Is, well, everybody else says it's unconstitutional, I guess I can't chime in otherwise. I don't know if you saw that part in here.
Oh yeah,
where they go down to this. It's very Rousseauian that the majority is never wrong, and I'm like that. Yeah, with Rousseau, you can do a lot of things that are really like very scary. But yeah, the way they go with this is just
Justice Barrett. I thought when I first read the opinion, I thought she was being. I hadn't read Justice Jackson's dissent yet.
Yeah.
And I thought, wow, she's going very hard on Justice Jackson. Like, for those of you who aren't in the business, at one point she says, "See Marbury v. Madison."
Yes,
Marbury
right here.
v. Madison is the most seminal case in federal law. It is the most important one. It stands for 2 principles: that the court has the right to review acts for their constitutionality, and as is the case here, sometimes there is a legal right and there is no remedy, because that's what happened in Marbury v. Madison.
Yes.
The court said the action was illegal, but that there was nothing the court could do about it.
Yeah, it's too late. We can't undo it. Yeah,
so
we can't unring the bell.
But this line, where no one disputes that the executive has a duty to follow the law, but the judiciary does not have unbridled authority to enforce this obligation. In fact, sometimes the law prohibits the judiciary from doing so. See e.g. Marbury v. Madison, which is see Jackson's dissent, which is a brutal rejoinder. That is the legal equivalent of a backslap to the face.
Yes.
And I thought that was unwarranted until I read the dissent and realized, oh my God, Justice Jackson actually is saying anytime there is a violation of the law by the executive, the courts have the power to restrain the executive flat stop no matter what. Whether or not there's any law enabling them to do so, it doesn't matter. The courts can just...
we can never be wrong. And that, no, like, it's funny because, we keep on hearing that, we're not, no kings. It's like, yeah. And you know what? No judge is king either. Because if you're saying that a district court judge can tell the president to do whatever he wants, who is president then? Who is in charge, really? Who is the king? Because this guy could tell the most powerful man in the world what to do. Guess who's the most powerful man in the world now? A sitting federal judge. And it's like, as much as the joke goes that the difference between a federal judge and God is that God knows he's not a federal judge, they're not supposed to live up to the joke.
Yeah. Well,
and this is where they do it.
The Garcia case, where, if you guys remember, there was, Trump had deported Mr. Garcia, and then the district court ordered that the executive branch facilitate his return and effectuate his return.
Guys, we're talking about the Afuera guy, the guy who got Afuera to El Salvador. And the one I know a lot of you my chat disagree with, we bring him back, give him the hearing. And this is where I think a lot of people left don't understand. Like, he's still going, like we're giving his, like we bring him back, we have his hearing. And this is where I'm sorry to go on this tangent, but I think this is where I think it's this idea, though, it's a little perverted to me. They're going to go, he gets his hearing and he still gets deported because they're going to remove it. They have removed it. They want to remove him. And like, that's the strategy right now. They're going to go, well, he got due process. Yay. And now we move along. I'm like, that seems so cold that, you just fought for the guy to get the process. Like, that's it at the end of the day. I mean, like, that seems completely insane that that's all we wanted was him to come back and have his hearing. Oh, and now he got his hearing and now we're okay with it. That part to me is kind of mind blowing, but.
Well, and the thing I was bringing up about that case,
Yeah,
I thought it was a very good lesson for the non-lawyers. The original district court orders ordered the Trump administration to effectuate his return and facilitate his return. Yes. Now, getting him back required negotiating with a foreign state. I don't think a district court has the power to order the president to enter into diplomatic negotiations with a foreign state, no more than they have the power to order the president to use a military strike on Iran or to issue a pardon. These are unique executive powers. The court has no role there. So the Supreme Court was correct in striking the word effectuate and saying, no, facilitate.
Yes.
Because what does that mean? It means we think you should do this. But we're not going to tell you have to. We think you should because you did something wrong, but we're not going to order you. And that's a recognition of the fact that there are limits on the court's power. There are things it cannot do. So, the idea that just because the court found that there's something illegal, that the court could order the president to enter into diplomatic negotiations.
Or turn the planes around.
My God, what you're doing in Cuba is wrong. I, district court judge, order you, Trump, to reopen trade negotiations with Cuba. Are you out of your mind? This is clearly not a power the court has.
Yes.
So just because there's a wrong doesn't mean the court has the power to right it. And Justice Jackson's vision, where anytime the court sees a wrong, they are empowered to order the federal government to right it. That is a wild overstep. And it would make the judiciary a super branch if it was listened to.
Yeah. And that's the thing. And we're now seeing it again, though, with the Judge Zinnis, I think that's how you pronounce her name, out in Maryland now, where she's saying, the DOJ is looking to dismiss the case against him in Tennessee. And they're still going to he's hopping back on the plane. And she's trying to get involved in saying, no, I want him brought here to Maryland. And it's like, she was today, I think it was, she was taking a crap all over the DOJ. And to be fair, they gave a bunch of bullshit answers. But at the end of the day, I still think they should have just said, fuck you. We're doing what we want. Article 2, have fun with that, Your Honor. And we dare you to stop this. Because I think that's where we're getting to this again, is a lot of these judges, I think, are really getting out over their skis on this. And, she's one of them. The judge in Massachusetts just now is one of them. We're going to get them in a little bit.
There was one today that was, I'm not familiar with the judge, so I can't give the name, but it was crazy. I mean, maybe someone in the comments can fill me in on what the arguments were, because I couldn't make any sense of this. But the reporting was, and it was just a headline I was skimming before I joined, that a Massachusetts judge ruled that Congress defunding Planned Parenthood needed to be enjoined. Yeah. And I was thinking, like, on like a constitutional level, Congress is the branch with the power over funding.
Yes.
If Congress says we will not fund X, on what possible basis could the judge then enjoin that? Like, what argument could there possibly be that Congress doesn't have the power to determine how the money gets spent?
Yeah, well, no, and that's where, once again, now they feel that, well, I'm in charge of this. And it's like, well, now you're in charge of 2 branches of government? I mean, what's like the next step is, if I happen to get a judge in Texas to do what I want, the joke, I'm sure you remembered it, the meme was Hawaii judge in Trump's first term.
Yeah.
Hawaii judge overruled this, Hawaii judge like you're going to start getting judges out of like these district court judges are going to start trying to overrule each other. And that's clearly not what you're meant to do. But we're going to see it, and it's going to be and it's the thing where we spend so much time crying, you could talk about the rule of law, but at some point you have to stop and realize like this is turning into the rule of man very quickly. Just because you wrap yourself in the law doesn't mean you're skinwalking in the law, doesn't mean you are the law. And that's what we're seeing now. And that's, I saw that today and I was like, I don't understand, I don't see how that survives the First Circuit. I'm sure they're going to laugh at it and say, lol, no, you can't do that. And these judges are, I think this whole nonsense of like we should impeach judges isn't going to work. There's some times where I'm like, I think these people should get drugged through the mud. Like, this guy thought it was a good idea. I think, sometimes they need to be called out for that.
And please, if there's listeners who have an understanding of like, I've no shade. I absolutely want to know what the best argument in favor of this action was, because I'm sure there's one I'm not thinking of, and maybe it's great. But to me, like in the constitutional framework, unless Congress's law violates the Constitution, it can issue whatever law it wants.
Yes,
and any law it issues supersedes previous laws because it's the lawmaking body.
Yes,
so
they're allowed to do this.
The law that says we will defund Planned Parenthood, there's no constitutional obligation to fund Planned Parenthood.
Yeah.
So on what possible basis could a court say it is illegal for Congress to defund an organization? I can't even think of what the argument is. So I'm being, as open as possible. Maybe it's a failure of my imagination. If anybody listening knows what the argument is, please let us know. But I
would love to know
my imagination.
Yeah. And guys, just real quick, I just, the thing is that Barrett here enforces when she keeps on listing Justice Jackson, and Ryan brought it up. It's you don't normally get to rebuke your colleagues like that. It's meant to be collegial because they don't want to turn the Supreme Court into a dumpster fire. But she wrote a majority opinion and all the justices signed off on it. That means that there's 6 judges who are very unhappy with Jackson. And they were all willing to sign off on all this. So that tells you a lot. They are not thrilled with how she's acted so far.
And keep in mind, Justice Sotomayor has written some flamethrower dissents recently, right? They don't treat Justice Sotomayor like this.
Yes.
And the reason is Justice Sotomayor's dissents, I'm an originalist. I'm likely to disagree with her, but they are at least bound by judicial philosophy, even if it's a philosophy I disagree with, right? What Justice Jackson wrote in her dissent in this case just seemed untethered by any legal principle I've ever seen. It was an articulation of pure judicial maximism. And I think that it is correct to point that out. I said it earlier, I was stunned. I read language like what you've highlighted on the screen.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh my God, Justice Barrett, what are you doing? This is not in keeping for the decorum of the court. And then I read the dissent and said, oh, something had to be done. Because that is, you can't let that germ fester and turn into a new idea, because that's a dangerous way to view the law.
Oh, 100. And they point out here, everyone's bound by the law. Even the judges are bound by the law. And that's a critical point. Everybody's bound by the law. And, Justice Jackson would do well to heed her own admonition. It's like, that's Barrett telling her to check herself before she wrecks herself.
Well, this is the essential originalist position, which is that, originalists are concerned that if the court takes upon itself the ability to create new constitutional rights, to order the other branches of government to abide by those rights, then the court becomes an unelected super branch, with the
Yes.
power to do whatever it wants in whatever creative application it wants. And we have a legislature. We have a branch of government that tells us what law is being created. We don't need another one. We want the courts to be courts. We want them to act like lawyers. They engage in legal reasoning, they reach legal conclusions. They should not be inventing policy rationales and saying what's best or what would be noble and good and true. That is not for the courts. That is for Congress. And when the courts overstep, just like when the president oversteps, it's dangerous.
Yeah. And based on their logic, based on Justice Jackson's logic, well, the courts are never wrong. If the court decrees, it has therefore been decreed. If the court says it's unconstitutional, guess what? It's unconstitutional. It's like, but are you sure? Like you might be wrong. And for her, they'll never be wrong. And this is, I think, the last paragraph here that Barrett puts together, the last two paragraphs, she basically points out like breaking the law is not a remedy. Like the government's broken the law, breaking it back does not fix the problem. Sometimes you're left with a shitty remedy, and that c'est la vie. That happens to just be what it is. But you don't get to abuse your own power to combat another abuse of power. This thing about you say you're about the rule of law. Well, that means you're about the rule of law. And this is, I think this last part is actually a big call out to her on that. And when this is the end of Barrett's thing here, and then we move on to Uncle Clarence. He comes in, he says, I agree. No, he's Uncle Clarence here. He's Uncle Clarence is a great guy. I agree and join in full. Notice him and Gorsuch are both saying we agree with everything you just said. So all that shit talking above, chat, we fully agree. And he's taking a victory lap saying, I told you guys in 2019 this was gonna happen. I told you in 2019 we were gonna do this. And he gets to run through. Justice Alito, gets to come in. And it's funny because Clarence Thomas like, I'm gonna jump in here too and talk shit. I think he just wanted to like victory lap this a little bit. I joined the opinion of the court. And he's like, I want to talk about other issues that are left unresolved and potentially threaten the significance of today's decision. And he's talking about something different, but he agrees. Alito's like, yeah, fuck Justice Jackson. And goes
and what the court's doing here is they're laying breadcrumbs. Like if you read Barrett's opinion, she cites all the times the court warned, hey, district courts, if you keep issuing these universal injunctions, we're eventually going to do something about it. And she cites 7 or 8 cases whereas the Supreme Court has warned this is happening. And the district courts didn't get the message. And the example I would give, by the way, in California, when there was the riots and there was the case about whether Trump could use the National Guard, the district court said he couldn't, but the district court did it in a really cautious way. They said, we think the president can't do this, but we know this is very sensitive, so we're going to stay our own order until it's reviewed by the Ninth Circuit. And that was, I thought, admirable judicial restraint because the court recognized, hey, I'm just one district court. Here's how I think it should turn out. But I'm not going to order the president about national security because that's not the sort of thing I should be doing. I'm going to leave my order, but I'm going to give it to the circuit court, and it's never going to go into effect before the circuit court gets to review it. Which is that if every court did that, we wouldn't have the universal injunction case. The problem is most district courts have been issuing flat stop, boom, it goes into effect. Across the country, it's law now.
And I agree. But I think with the I forget who I was following on Twitter, but he pointed out like when you start off your opinion with Marbury versus Madison, it's fucking awful. And that's what that judge did. He's like, I'm like, it's like, Jesus Christ, man, you're not like that I agree with you ultimately, but he still wanted to, these judges want to preen.
Oh yeah.
And it's the faux intellectualism. But yeah, Thomas gets to say, I told you so. Kavanaugh's like, yeah, I agree. Let's crack open a beer. He goes a little further, but notice none of them are saying, oh, that was a little harsh what you did to Ketanji. No, they're all 6 of these people are like, yeah, she's being a little bit tardy in this one. We don't like what she's doing. And Even Sotomayor gets called out here a couple of times in her thing. But it really comes down to what Jackson. It's just
they disagree with Sotomayor, but they're not flamethrowing.
No, they're like, we just disagree with you. And some of the things here, I think this is something where Sotomayor, she gets down here and she's saying the government's asking the court to hold that no matter how illegal, the court can never tell the executive to stop it. Well, you guys are so far in the other direction saying there's nothing the court can't do, and what it says is like above reproach. And it's like, that's not acceptable either. That's not the right answer too. And that goes back to what, Barrett said. Breaking the law doesn't fix a violation of law. You don't get to go out and break the law yourself. You're not allowed to do that. And I think that's something Sotomayor isn't really willing to address. Is, she's not willing to admit or bite the bullet on, well, what am I asking for? And she won't do that. I mean, if she had her way, I'm sure she would fully agree with Jackson. I'm sure she's doing a good job keeping her mask on, but I'm sure if you could get 5 votes for what Jackson wants, I'm sure she would jump on that.
I think if there was a liberal majority, what they would have done is decline cert on
I don't think
the question of the universal injunctions, waited for the merits, and then ruled. As I think that there's a strong likelihood on the merits, I think the birthright citizenship arguments are probably not in favor of the Trump administration.
Oh, I agree. I think they're going to lose that at the end.
Yeah, I think they're going to lose that. But I mean, it's not an open and shut case, but I think they're probably going to lose. So I think they would have just waited for that and not taken this opportunity to speak about universal injunctions.
Yeah, and I think I mentioned that to my chat when we were listening to the oral arguments. Yeah, they're probably going to lose because it's very much I keep telling chat because I love the Second Amendment and I think Bruin's great, but they think, oh, well, you should rule the National Firearms Act unconstitutional. And I tried to explain to them, you're not going to, even if you put 9 Clarence Thomases on the Supreme Court, you are not going to get them to say, yes, you can own unregistered Uzis right now. You're never going to get that. And to get the Supreme Court to overturn birthright citizenship, they're not going to do that. I don't even know if Clarence Thomas would support that. I don't know if he would go that far at this point.
Yeah, there are some, the best arguments I've heard for like a Justice Thomas, because for him, you always have to appeal to the history, is, at the time of enactment, for example, if there was an invading force, like if the U.S. was being invaded by Canada or Mexico, and like the foreign soldiers were here and they assaulted.
They brought their families with them.
Oh no, they assaulted a bunch of U.S. citizens when they were territory, and those citizens had children. Are we required to then make those children citizens? And like I think the answer to that is probably not in the invading force scenario. So there's some limitations to birthright citizenship that have a historic analog, which is why I don't think it's like a 100%, 100-0 case. But I think maybe Thomas, maybe Alito would vote that Trump wins, but I think it's going to be 7-2 the other way.
Yeah, I just don't see it happening. I don't see it happening. But this is where, and this is something that I think Sotomayor keeps whining about. Well, tomorrow the other, another administration could do, they could turn around and fuck you guys over. And that was part of the argument made in court in the oral arguments was like, well, tomorrow, President so-and-so could fuck you guys out of guns or whatever. And it's like, yeah, isn't that really wrong? So you're like, I love, a lot of bad things can happen here.
Well, this is the other punchline, right? Which is like I guess the liberal and the conservative wings have different answers to this question. I think everyone agrees executive overreach has become a problem, right? The kind of left-leaning solution is to make the presidency weaker. Like the president can't even overrule his own bureaucrats. The bureaucrats are in charge and the president is the figurehead. The kind of more conservative or originalist solution is, well, then that's why we need to limit the scope of the federal government. We agree if you're going to make the federal government this big, the president is tremendously powerful and can do all kinds of things that we might disagree with. And it makes the election probably too consequential, which is exactly why we should limit the scope of the federal government, return power to the states so that it doesn't, like, electing the president doesn't matter to your day-to-day life the way it currently does. So, I mean, I just don't think making an unelected bureaucracy in DC the inheritors of unlimited executive power is a good solution to that problem. I think the best government is local and responsive, and it's people you know. And this is borne out, by the way. Like, I've talked to so many conservatives who have said something like, I would never vote for a Democrat in a national election, but I would and have voted for Democrats in local elections. Because in local elections, I know the guys. I know it's Bob and it's Gary. Maybe Bob's in the same party as me, but Bob's a motherfucker. I don't want Bob in power. You know, so I'm not voting for Bob. I know what he's like. I'm voting for Gary because it's local. The parties don't matter as much as the people. And that's how democracy actually functions.
And even when the parties do matter, I've seen party intrigue reach across the lines where they're like, can you help us snuff this guy out in the primary? We don't want him anymore. And we you know, this guy's he's the incumbent and nobody likes him, but he's got too much party power. And, you know, I've seen the Democrats and Republicans like, hey, can you help us take this guy out? You know, like, we need help here. And like, at the local level, you can get that you know, that cooperation at times, because, you know, what Planned Parenthood doesn't really matter about, like, making sure the streets are paved and the fire department works. Like, there's ways you can just make sure your community's good.
Oh, absolutely. And there's so much the federal government does. And now we're just going on a tangent, but it's like my pet project, so I can't resist. That if you told the founding fathers the federal government was doing these things, they would lose their mind, because there is no need for the federal government to be completely involved in local affairs. Interstate commerce is one thing. National defense is one thing. Diplomacy, war. There's a lot of places where we need a robust federal government, but it's not everything. And it's gotten to the point where every issue is a national issue, and people are not willing to say, oh, you know what? It's possible that people in Alabama want to live one way, people in Ohio want to live one way, and people in California want to live a different way. And it's okay that those three places are pretty different.
Yes, to an extent, they can be different. And just going to that federal power, though, the executive power, I mentioned this to Pisco when I was on this thing. This isn't new. This no king, like, all that shit's ridiculous in my opinion. This is the natural progression. And you can make the argument going all the way back to George Washington, leading troops in the battle. Okay, Thomas Jefferson buying Louisiana. We'll skip all the way up to Harry Truman, because what FDR did, I think we all agree, massive expansion of executive power. But Truman seizing a steel mill in the middle of the Korean War because they needed steel for armament production, going forward today, is a natural trajectory. Like, this isn't shocked Pikachu face time, because if Trump had lost, Kamala Harris would be running wild through the streets with her hair on fire too. And the only difference is we wouldn't be getting, like, there would be some injunctions being granted, but there's no way you're getting, Judicial Watch or the, what's the other guy's name? Jay Sekulow waltzing into the DC District Court trying to get injunctions on everybody. Like, that's not happening. That would be really the only difference. So this isn't really new. This is a natural progression and trajectory of federal power. It's always expanding. Well, and whoever takes over after this is going to go even further
until someone does something about it, right?
Yeah.
And this is ultimately my great sadness about the Biden administration. And if people have been watching me, they know I voted for Biden when he ran. But what I thought I was getting was somebody who knew he was a one-term president, who was coming in to end an emergency, like the COVID emergency, see it through, end it. And then because he was I thought going to be a one-term president who would not run a second time, he would be in a position to start releasing executive power to the other branches and to ride into the sunset as a hero who kind of restored balance to the force, as it were. So when he went the totally opposite direction, which I agree with you in hindsight was 100% predictable, but when he went the opposite direction and said, oh, we thought Obama expanded executive power with the drone strikes. We thought Trump expanded executive power with the wall. Hold my beer. Universal vaccine mandates.
Yeah.
Forgiving $500 billion of federal loan. I mean, just went full bore on executive power. It felt like a massive betrayal and a lost opportunity because, as much as there's no universe where you could say Trump was running to be a limited executive. Trump was running to be a maximalist executive.
Yes.
And we all knew that. So Biden, it felt like maybe we could have rolled back executive power. There was an opportunity there. It was not taken, which is a bummer.
And I guess I want to say, I know some people in chat, like, guys, Ryan's admitting, I voted for him and it turns out I was wrong. Like, he's at least, he's admitting it. Well, I was a little like, I was like, I was wrong about what he was going to do. And I was like, not exactly what I was hoping to get. Like, there's nothing wrong with saying that. I was hoping we get some stuff out of Trump, but now he's, like, I'm not exactly thrilled with how this is going this time around. Like, you're allowed to say that. You're allowed to say you're not thrilled with how this person did what you thought they were going to do.
And look, I'm a life prior to this last cycle where, and this is all established lore. So I'm, people who've seen on other channels prior to this last cycle where I didn't think I could support either candidate. I was historically a Democratic voter my entire life.
Are you saying it's all your fault?
Right. It sounds right. It's all about me. In law school, I realized I was an originalist, which has made being a Democratic voter in the future dicey, I would say. And also, the Democratic Party lost its mind in 2020. Like, I mean, just lost its mind. So some of the stuff that it started favoring, I can't get behind. I think that, like, for example, and I went blood sports with Peace Code, had a really heated debate about this recently, but I do think the stated policy of the Democratic Party was to enact certain types of racial discrimination into law. Like they actually thought that reverse discrimination should be legal and fine. And, I mean, like, look, I'm not to put like too fine a point on it, but I have kids. Like, am I going to vote for a party that wants to legalize discrimination against my kids? Probably not. That's a bummer. But like, I think these are just self-owns. Like, the Democrats don't have to support that stuff. They just did. And I hope they stop. I would like to have a party that actually has a chance in national elections, but the current Democratic Party, I think, is dead on arrival.
Yeah, and the funny thing with the not necessarily reverse discrimination, but the Ames versus the Ohio prison system case, even Jackson was on board with, like, we never said you guys could do this. And these courts randomly made up their own rules, and they're like, that's not the rule we made up. Like, you guys made up your own rules on top of our rules, and those rules aren't good anymore. And discrimination is just discrimination, which I find it hard to believe it's taken 50 years to get to that point where we just say, yes, discrimination is bad. Don't do it.
The way to have less discrimination on the basis of race is to stop discriminating on the basis of race.
Yes.
It's not complicated. It's very, very simple. Yes. But I do think that there was dangerous stuff that the Democratic Party was cozying up to. I'm hoping that in the next election cycle they'll have jettisoned all these bad ideas. It doesn't seem like they are, but fingers crossed.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like they're breaking out the pickaxes and digging in,
doubling down. It's wild to me.
Yes, but I say we can keep getting back to this here. I say we need to get to the parts here, but like Sotomayor gets to this one part, and it's she talks about this and she laments that not being able to enforce policy can be, that's not irreparable. I'm like, that's pretty irreparable. Telling 77 million people what you wanted happened is, like what's the problem if you don't get to do what you want? I mean, is that really the, what's the grave concern there? I mean, and she tries to say that's not a problem. I'm like, okay, let's go back to, if I'm Governor Favis and I get an injunction from the court in Little Rock saying, no, you can't let black kids come to school. Well, what's the harm if we just leave the injunction in place? A judge said, no, you can't do that. The will of the people at times, like, that's a harm. That's a significant harm. And if the government's in charge of doing its Article 2 powers, that can be a big harm.
And keep in mind, the lifetime of a president is really measured in the first 100 days. Everyone knows that after the first 100 days, presidents get sucked into the midterms and all kinds of other problems where they have to kind of play politics. So all you have to do is look at what happened to Doge. And for the record, Doge stepped on so many unnecessary rakes. I wish they had better legal counsel that could have helped them avoid. Some of the stuff they did was totally unnecessary, and they could have been a lot more successful if they had better advice or listened to their better advice. One of the two. I don't know that. But the fact that they did have all these legal problems just stalled the program out to the point where it was never able to accomplish much. And that is the harm, right? Like, sometimes in politics, there is time sensitivity.
Yes. I agree. And especially for somebody like Trump, this is it. He's got one, like, this is his last, like, there is no re-election for him. So it's even more critical because he came back and we all know that he can't run again. And then, just Sotomayor here, saying that, we're stripping the federal courts of, all equitable remedy. It's like, when you abuse things, they get taken away. That is a remedy as well. When this stuff is routinely getting abused, courts will not allow you to do that after a while. Thomas warned you, you guys are pissing us off.
Well, and also in a democracy, you would hope the tie goes to the elected official on some level, right?
Yes.
Like, the courts are all lifetime appointees, and the president is elected by the people. So if the president is enforcing the will of the people and courts have an issue with it, it actually does make sense for the courts to be the ones that have to go through the extra steps. Yes, we have to go through class certification. We have to ensure that we have the right group of plaintiffs. And then we still can do an injunction that would prevent the president from doing what he wants to do. And in some cases, as you mentioned, Justice Thomas said, there might be cases where you don't even need to do that on a case-by-case basis. But it's not the default rule that the court gets to enjoin the president flat stop.
And this is, and then, just going on from there, I mean, she copes and sees a lot. And she just keeps on going. She copes and sees for about 40 pages, and we're not, and she does.
Have you seen the graphs about, the word count of the different justices at oral argument?
Yes.
It's so funny. Justice Jackson speaks more than every other justice combined. And Justice Sotomayor is like the only one that's even on the same order of magnitude as Justice Jackson. It's really funny.
Well, and Chad, part of the reason why that's really funny too is because throughout the history of the Supreme Court, the new justices it's kind of been an unwritten rule as you have lips like a statue. You're not doing a lot of talking. You shouldn't be doing a lot of talking. Now, is that always the right thing? I mean, no, it's not like she's brand new to the job. She's been a judge before. But traditionally, if you're new on the court, you don't talk that much. Now, that doesn't mean you have to talk less than Clarence Thomas traditionally would do. But you can, you're not supposed to be running away with the trophy.
Now, in fairness, if you know you're in the minority, you're more likely to write long and speak a lot because you're trying to make a point because you're going to lose.
Yes.
And that's fair enough, but still it's being taken to a real excess.
Yes. And this is something Sotomayor starts to focus on, and this is something Jackson really hammers on, Every court that has considered the merits has found it unconstitutional. Okay, so what? That's not something like. Now remember, every court, that means 6 courts so far. Just 6. 6 judges have said it's unconstitutional. I don't, that's not a. When you're talking about across the United States of America, that's one. Like, if you're talking about like in the county I live in, if 6 judges said something's wrong, that's a lot of judges. If you're talking about the entire United States, that's not that many judges. But this argument that it's been found unconstitutional, therefore we know it's bad, we shouldn't even bother with it. That's an awful argument. There have been multiple cases where it gets all the way to Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court's the one who has to turn the ship around. Like Terry v. Ohio was one of those. Like multiple, like in criminal law, routinely, goes all the way to the state Supreme Court, and then the U.S. Supreme Court has to say, no, you guys are all wrong. This argument, I think, it's a very Rousseauian thing. Like the majority is like, we all said it, we decreed it. It's like, no, I don't like it.
Yeah, and I don't if anybody here crosses over with Wick's audience. I was debating a different case on Wick last night. One of the lawyers I was debating about started saying that he wanted the court to make policy that was good, that was noble and good, and would do the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's exactly the problem with living constitutionalism. Like, I don't want the court to invent policy that's good and noble and true.
Yes.
I want them to enforce the law. And the question here is not whether birthright citizenship is constitutional or not. The question is purely, is the practice of universal injunctions within the power of the district court? So the whole question about the merits is besides the point. And Justice Jackson knows that. And she's just signaling that she would like a different outcome, which is fine. She's in the dissent. She can do that. But it is a problem for me when the court starts deciding things on the basis of policy rather than law.
And this is where she kind of gets to, when I read through this, though Barrett, what's that?
I'm reading this again. This is insane.
Well, no, this is very much, this is a Dr. Malcolm moment from Jurassic Park. It's like, may a federal court in the United States order the executive follow law. It's like, you're worried about, can you do it? Should you do it? And you haven't considered, should you be doing this? Who limits you? And, that's the point of this. She doesn't seem to recognize, like, who put the nickel in you? Who decided you're in charge of this?
Sorry, can you just stay on that paragraph for a second? I mean,
yeah,
this
sure,
is
sure.
Remarkable. Like, to hear the majority tell it, this suit raises a mind-numbing technical query. Now, what follows there, if you're a non-lawyer, might sound like a mind-numbing technical query. That is not at all a mind-numbing technical query.
It's not. It's very basic.
The core question, when the court was, we said at the beginning of the show, we explained it very clearly and easily in non-legalese. When the court was given the power in equity, was it given this power? That is the type of question lawyers and judges routinely answer. But she says it's a legalese smokescreen that obscures the basic and enormous legal question. May a federal court in the United States of America order the executive to follow the law? Which is not at all the question. And it's an emotional appeal to, shouldn't the court say the law is the law? And your heart wants to say yes, because of who would say no to that. But what she's actually saying is, shouldn't the court get to do what it thinks is right despite the law? Which is, she calls the law a smokescreen. The law is a mind-numbing technical query. The law is just legalese. That's an insane thing for a judge to say.
Well, that's just, well, if I don't like it, it's legalese. If I don't like it, it's confusing or it's dishonest. It's just, back in 1789, were we allowed to do this? Yes or no? Would they have wanted us to be allowed to do this in 1789? Yes or no? And she said, oh, that doesn't matter. It's just, can we do it? That's her only question is, can we do it? Not should we do it? Not what is this going to cause down the road? It's just, are we allowed to do it? And in her opinion, there's nothing that stops her.
And just to like explain why this offends me so much.
Mhm.
This is a question of the court interpreting the law to decide how much power the court has.
Mhm.
So if the court, as Justice Sotomayor is suggested,
Mhm.
is free to say, well, equity is a flexible concept. So whatever they meant in 1789, it could mean something different today.
Mhm.
That would mean the court is allowed to decide what equitable powers the court has, flat stop, meaning
Mhm.
the court has whatever powers it wants.
Yes.
There's no limiting principle. Whatever the
Yes.
court thinks is right, the court has the power to do. That's
Mhm.
an unlimited judicial monarchy. It
Yes.
is totally unacceptable. And to kind of backdoor into it with this pretense of nobility, it's actually quite alarming.
Well, and it is because she goes on to this and she says, it's imperative. Everybody from the president on down is bound by the law. Well, that includes you, sweetheart. You're bound by the law too. The president, no one's above the law. Okay, well, that includes the Supreme Court.
Oh my God, she actually says it. By duty and nature, federal courts say what the law is
Yeah.
and require those who are subject to the law to conform their behavior to what the law requires. This is the essence of the rule of law. Now, another way to frame that, maybe a more judicially modest way of saying that, would be Congress says what the law is and the courts interpret it.
Yes.
Right?
And I think that's the more accurate statement. Because here we passed the law. Okay, well, it's either good or, we'll determine, we get to interpret what that law means. But yes, she's saying I can decide what the law is. I have, I am the law is what she's trying to do at the end of the day.
Yeah, well, this is why I brought up the Planned Parenthood case earlier. Like, if Congress passes a law, that's the law. Courts don't get to decide what the law is; they just interpret it. So if Congress could say something you hate, maybe you're a big fan of Planned Parenthood, and Congress defunded them, and you're upset about it, and maybe you're a judge and you're upset about it. That's all fine, but judges don't get to play Congress. They don't get to decide what Congress should have done.
Yes, and this is where, she likes to use these terms, and she's citing Montesquieu and the spirit of laws through separated institutions. Power checks power. Okay, well, who checks you? Because all we're hearing about is your ability to check the executive. And now we're hearing that you can check Congress. Okay. Can they check you? And based on her determination, I get to decide what the law is. No, you can't. You can't check me. Only I can check myself. And that's where she views it as though she's some sort of robed cleric who, this is the scariest type of people to have on the bench. Like, they think they're the all-knowing, and it's kind of like you ever read the book The Giver? Or I know you're a teacher. Did you kids ever read that? Or I don't know what you taught in school.
I taught elementary school, but I've read the book. Yeah.
Yeah. But you know what I mean? You get to this like sorcery type stuff that like it's only us that know, and we're the hollowed and the guardians of all of this. Like, okay, like let's quit churching it up. You're a federal judge. You are not the only thing standing between. You're not the firewall of the Constitution.
Yeah. If
you're
I was
part of it.
If I was going to make a book recommendation for the audience, if you haven't read Thomas Sowell's A Conflict of Visions, it's a phenomenal political theory book. And one of the things he lays out that on the left, there's what he calls the unconstrained vision, which is this idea that if we follow our reason and we're honest and true and noble and good and sincere, that there really is one best outcome, and that we're all moving towards this utopia together. And if only the reasonable people were given the power to enforce their vision, then surely we would reach it together.
Yes.
And that makes what that leads to. I totally agree with the chat, by the way.
Yes, it is.
What that leads to is this form of hubris that we're seeing here.
Yes.
The idea that because I believe I'm right and reasonable and noble and good, I should have the power to do whatever I want.
Yes. My intentions were good.
Yeah. I don't have the humility to say, no, I'm just one person, and the limitations on my power are what makes the system work, because I'm flawed and vulnerable and I can be unreasonable and mistaken. And so this kind of power grab is remarkable and honestly scary.
Yes. Well, and she just goes on here, and guys, if you want to, some of the parts here, she says, when the executive transgresses an act of Congress, there are mechanisms to which Congress can assert its check unilaterally, such as, for example, asserting the power of the purse. And she acknowledges that, there are checks out there. She acknowledged it a little bit.
She doesn't say what the check on the judiciary is.
Yeah, well, and that's
overstepping on the executive.
Well, and that's the thing Sotomayor doesn't acknowledge too, and I mentioned that a little bit earlier. What's your check? How do they stop you?
Yeah, and if the Congress is annoyed with the judiciary, they can impeach them.
Yes, or they could abolish Judiciary Act too.
Yeah, they could do that. If the president is annoyed with the judiciary, the check is he could ignore them.
Yes.
But that's a very dangerous thing for the president to do. That has its own problems with the rule of law, which is why wiser justices recognize they can check the president so much, but they're not going to initiate a conflict where the president might start ignoring them, because that would be a constitutional crisis.
Yes.
So, but that's a two-way street. The court should be careful to avoid creating such a crisis.
I agree. Yes. Then they've allowed the courts to do this. This nationwide injunction thing has been so disingenuous that at some point, like, you want people, just in general, you want people to believe that actions brought before the law are just or valid or reasonable. But if after a while people think that everything getting brought before the court's a load of shit, do you really blame people for ignoring them? It would be human nature to start ignoring it. And that human nature extends to us as people who are elected officials. If it's all garbage, I'm not going to bother listening to it. And that's where we've seen case after case after case where the injunction happens, and then, like, Hampton Dellinger is one of the shittiest ones of all. They read and screed and cried, and then DC Circuit Court's like, yeah, you're fucked. And then Hampton Dellinger's like, all right, well, I'm tapping out. I'm out. I'm done. I don't want to set bad precedent now. It's like, then what, that's where, how do you not blame people for saying, go ahead, ignore the court?
Yes. I will say this, though. I will never crap on a lawyer for not taking the case all the way to avoid creating bad precedent. I don't know if you were following the trans rights case that was before the Supreme Court.
Scrimetti?
Yeah. That case, I listened to oral argument, and I was thinking to myself, this is a surefire loser.
We did too.
There is no shot that this court is going to side with the trans plaintiffs, right? It's 0% chance. You're dead on arrival. Yeah. So to me, it bordered on legal malpractice.
It was
bring that case to the Supreme Court, and get bad law for your clients. Like,
it wasn't about that, though. We got to have our heckin' trans person come in and argue in front of the Supreme Court. Wasn't that stunning and brave? Well, because that's one of the people arguing. But here's the problem: when Chase Strangio went up there and argued, Zir whatever got fucking blown out of the fucking water. Well, I mean, I don't know if you remember that part, but, like, they sent that person up there and they ate shit. Like, she, whatever, ate like a mountain of shit on the record in front of the Supreme Court. And I'm like, what did you guys accomplish?
Well,
now you got bad case law.
This is what I'm saying. Like, let's set aside the merits, right? Like, because I'm a lawyer, right? You can pay me to have the opinion you want me to have. That's the nature of my job.
I agree.
So if I had been hired to help the trans plaintiffs in that case, right? My advice to them would have been, do not bring this case to this court.
Yeah.
You will lose. You will lose, and you will create bad precedent. It doesn't matter how clever your arguments are. It doesn't matter how noble you think your causes are. You have no shot. It is a bad idea for your clients. It will hurt them. And I think you nailed it. Like, the case was not brought because they thought they could win. The case was brought for publicity and to have a trans lawyer argue. And to me, as a lawyer, when you bring a case, those are the exact wrong reasons. You're supposed to be doing what's good for your client. Your client's interests are the only thing that matters. And I was stunned by the bad lawyering in that case. It was very troubling.
And I get, like, if I'm, some local common pleas court here in Ohio, I have a client who's trying to make a stand against the local government. That's not going to hurt any. Like, you're making your stand. That's not binding on nobody. But yeah, taking this all the way where you've now altered history going forward for anybody else, the amount of selfishness involved to just torpedo that is just, I mean, for example, like the Heller case, that was specifically like they took years of looking for the right guy to make their plaintiff. And in Skermetti, it just sounds like they're like, no, send it. We'll just run with it. Yeah. And it's like they forgot, your job is to win.
And I think that people, maybe if for the non-lawyers who haven't, like, when you're litigating at the Supreme Court level, you're supposed to be so granular about this. Like when I litigated before the Supreme Court, we wrote briefs for each justice, and then we combined them because we were trying to figure out what combination of justices we thought could work for us. So we were like, okay, we think we're going to get these 4. We think these 3 are maybes. So we're going to write a brief for each of the maybes and then combine those into one so that we're appealing to, like, you're supposed to be so tuned in to exactly what each justice thinks because the stakes couldn't be higher. And this court was never going to say that a rule that blocks, gender affirming care for minors is sex-based discrimination. It's, I don't even think that was a 90-10. I think that was 100-0. There was no chance. I would have ranked that 0% likelihood. It wasn't close. So I don't know what those lawyers were doing. They certainly weren't thinking about their clients.
Well, I mean, but then again, though, I think their clients, I think the clients were wrapped up in being on the crusade too. But yes, that's where as the attorney, you need to sit them down and say, look, you're going to lose. And sometimes your client says, fine, here, keep spending money, whatever. But then you have to sit down to your client and say, you are going to screw your cause. And that was the thing here. Now you've got, stare decisis. Like you've got this sitting there. You're going to have to fight around the next time around.
Oh my God. So, I mean, like, let's put it this way. I've been putting myself in the shoes of the lawyer who was working for the trans plaintiffs and saying why I would advise them not to do this. If I was on the other side and I was a lawyer who was trying to strike down this kind of like gender affirming care and work against all that, I would be paying these plaintiffs legal bills. Oh yeah, it's on me.
Keep going. No, whatever you do, don't file cert. I'm so scared.
Oh yeah, come on, keep going. I'm happy to pay for it. Don't worry about it. I'd love to litigate this. Keep going, buddy.
Yes.
So, that I think that goes to show how careless they were.
Yes, it is. And then now we're going to get back to, and see, I like going on tangents. That's perfect. This is where Jackson starts going to. He says it doesn't matter what 6 federal courts have said. Well, no, it's 6 judges somewhere have said something, and that's just out of 93 federal courts. There's 93 district courts out there. And the total, that's the thing. And she's pointing it out. She's saying, and this is where it gets even funnier. I'm like, do I think probably almost all federal judges would probably agree that the 14th Amendment is going to get overturned? Yeah, sure. But that's where she starts. It's like, how many, out of how many, I forgot that's how many district court judges are there?
Oh, it's a lot. I can't remember.
Yeah.
But
there's 677 of them. So we're 6 for 677.
Well, and a few points about this. This is in the majority opinion.
No,
but
fun
fact: if let's say Sean and I were litigating against each other in District of Ohio, right? And then I sue somebody else in the District of Ohio for the exact same thing. Those 2 district court judges aren't even binding on each other.
Yes, that's
right?
yeah. Even under the
District
same
court
courthouse.
decisions are not binding on any other court. Flat
Yes.
stop. So A, that's kind of crazy. B, the second thing she says here, those courts are powerless to make the executive stop enforcing that order altogether. That's just not true. They are
They can enjoin in
empowered.
their district.
Yeah, they can stop it as to the plaintiffs. And if the plaintiffs form a class, even a national class, they can stop it as to the class. What they can't do is order the president just to stop because one person shows up in court and says so.
Yes. And this is where when she does this and she unintentionally breaks it down in a way that's helpful. She's pointing out only 6 judges so far, that it's such a minority. Like a fractions of percents are agreeing with this. That this is acceptable to her. And this goes to her idea of these being the robed leaders of America. That if a district court judge decrees it is therefore so decreed.
Well, I mean, imagine that 677 includes the judges in Texas and Florida.
Yeah.
How do you think those would have turned out?
Well, I think most of those. I think you get a lot of those probably agreeing along.
I think you're right. Actually, on this one,
But let's say it's a Second Amendment issue.
issue.
That's gonna. Good Lord, you're gonna have a split. You'll have a split in the courthouses.
Yeah.
And she hammers on this again, and once again, she doesn't focus on, like, she goes back to it, and you're just like, you're helping reinforce the notion here that it's just 6 judges have said so far there's a problem. I don't understand how she can. Oh, where did I have it? 12 here. Sorry, somewhere I had.
I honestly think she's articulating a new judicial philosophy. Like typically, it's been. There's sub branches to both of these, but it's been originalism versus living constitutionalism. Yes. I think she's announcing a new philosophy of judicial maximism. Like she's saying that she believes that the court has the power to do whatever it thinks the law is.
Yes.
And that is a completely new school of constitutional interpretation that I hope is dead on arrival. Because it's a crazy thing.
It's even scarier than, as I've joked, we're starting to find out the limits of Article 2 with Trump. And yes, for Trump, it's Article 2 über alles. And that's one thing. But for a judge to believe Article 3 über alles, that's even scarier than the maximalist president to me. I think ultimately.
I mean, it's not like the Constitution has a tier list, but but it kind of does. Congress is supposed to be the most powerful. The president's the second most powerful. Yeah. The court is a distant third.
Yeah, well, the tier list is just by how long are their things? Like, how long is each article? I mean, that tells you a lot about it. And also, really, at the end of the day, I keep telling my chat this, if the judges get too out of control, all 677 federal judges could disappear tomorrow, and 8 of the Supreme Court justices could disappear tomorrow. You'd have the scary part is then you'll have John Roberts, and I don't want that. I don't think anybody really wants it.
I'm going to be honest, like as an originalist, this is the best court of my lifetime. Like this,
it is.
This court has been phenomenal. And in particular, I mean, everyone has their own philosophy, but like I'm a Scalia type originalist, and Justice Barrett is a phenomenal Scalia type originalist. And she takes way too much crap from conservatives. For doing exactly what she should do, which is decide things in keeping with her judicial philosophy. She's been a rock star, but honestly, Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, and Barrett were incredible appointments. They've all been truthfully phenomenal justices.
They have.
Yeah. And this court right now is the most functioning branch of government. They are absolutely competent, and they've just been knocking out of the park.
Oh yeah, overall, I think they've been doing great so far. And this is once again the lack of self-reflection from Jackson here. When she cites as if one man, even a very important man, Okay, and
And
even a
even a
democratically elected
democratic-
man. Notice, well, okay, well, the judges are democratically elected, so we'll take that part out for now. Can be allowed to determine for himself what the law is. Every man can. Oh, did you just say it's your job to determine what the law is? That first means chaos, then tyranny. And maybe she didn't mean that, but I guess my idea is when you're a Supreme Court justice and you've got clerks, and you'd better be like, your words should be very explicitly used for a very explicit purpose and reason. You're
Can I-
not writing a suppression motion for a DUI in suburban Cleveland where I can kind of be fast and loose with things. No, you're at the Supreme Court. You're at the top of Olympus. You'd better be correct in what you're doing and saying. And she's completely oblivious to this. I guarantee it.
Oh my God. Yeah. Will you indulge me with a tangent? Because
Sure,
this is,
by all means.
I'd like to draw a parallel between this and Scalia's dissent in Obergefell, which was the gay marriage case. And his dissent in that case, if people haven't read it, that's what made me an originalist. And the story is, I was in Europe and very supportive of gay marriage. So when the case came out, I was very excited. I was so proud. I was like, I'm an American lawyer. Look what American lawyers did. We made gay marriage legal. I'm very proud of this. And then I read Obergefell. And if you've never read it, it is completely devoid of anything resembling legal reasoning. So it had the outcome I wanted, but it had no legal reasoning I could detect. It was a complete garbage opinion.
Kind of like Roe.
Yeah. And then
the way Ginsburg saw Roe.
You read Scalia's dissent, and he starts and he says, the question before the court about who can marry who does not interest me very much. It might be good policy, it might be bad policy, but the country has survived both good and bad policy, and it's not my job to determine what policy is. The question that interests me is who rules me. And today, the court has indicated that the body that rules me is 9 unelected judges who are empowered to determine what the law is and invent a right that never existed and hold the country accountable to it. And this was, for me, the argument that made me an originalist. And it's the argument that Justice Jackson should be paying attention to when she says, it is our job to say what the law is. No, it is not. It is not the court's job to announce the law. It is their job to interpret the law, to act like a lawyer. And if she thinks that the court is the body that is empowered in a society to determine what the law is, then yes, the court does rule us. They are the super branch. And it's remarkable to me that she doesn't see the danger that she's flirting with.
Well, I think for her, she thinks, well, we're all good people, and we're all. It's the we're the heckin' it's the meme. We're the good guy squad. Yeah, if we're the good guy squad. We can't be bad guys there because we're the good guys.
It's okay for us to have to take this power because we wouldn't abuse it because we're good. And if the other side takes this power and they abuse it, they shouldn't because that's bad. As opposed to saying every branch of government should stay in its lane, which is what the originalist wants, and we'll let democracy sort it out.
Yes. People are saying Scalia's dissent sounds like it's out of Dante. I'm like, it sounds like that. But once again, just another tone deaf. The accretion of dangerous power does not come in a day. You don't say. You don't say. You don't say. Hey, do you listen to yourself? Do you listen to yourself when you talk about this? It's just.
It's remarkable, especially because she's in the minority.
Yes.
So, this is the crazy thing about this, right? Let's say the originalists on the court suddenly agreed with her and said, we actually can just write law. We can make it whatever we want it to be.
Yeah.
You think they're going to write law she would enjoy?
Yeah.
She doesn't even want this court to do what she's suggesting. Yeah. She wants a different court that's composed of people like her to do what the good guys would do.
Yes.
and to live in a utopia forever. It's remarkable.
Yeah. I mean, and if let's say they wanted to start doing it, all they could do is cite this, and she would literally have, if they did that and they cited it, she literally wouldn't be able to say a goddamn. I'm sure she would say whatever she wanted, but literally it'd be the biggest own of all. We agree. We adopt your reasoning.
And by the way, for people who see me on other channels, I never do this. Like, I do not bag on justices' opinions this hard. This dissent is,
it's bad.
It's really like the Obergefell decision was the worst piece of legal writing I had seen from the Supreme Court in the modern era until this dissent. And dissents are held to a lower standard, but even up by that lower standard, it is a truly remarkably bad piece of writing.
Yes. And moving on to, and well, actually, real quick, Ryan, I didn't know. Do you still have some time to go over the DVD stuff?
Yeah.
Okay, I just didn't know. I didn't want to, you got kids and stuff. I didn't want to take up all your time. So I also don't know where you live because it's like 9:45 here in Ohio. So.
Oh yeah, I'm in the New York City area. So
okay, good. See, he's in God's time zone, the best time zone, chat.
Eastern Standard, God's time.
Yes, that's everything. Everything works off of that. So moving on, though, we see with this, and just real quick, because I know we talked about this already, chat, and I know Ryan's probably already seen this too. The Department of Homeland Security versus DVDs. It's a very Betamax driven decision because or Blu-ray, I'm not sure, but they didn't like DVDs, so they're getting rid of all the DVDs. They're deporting them to South Sudan. Reality though, chat, it's a bunch of people who are determined to be here illegally. Many of them have already been in prison and committed crimes. They're sitting in the naval brig at Camp Lemonnier in Djibouti. And yes, there is a military base in Djibouti. If you guys don't know what we're talking about, that's on the Horn of Africa, literally like up on the tip. It's right there by the entrance to the Red Sea. And they were going to get deported to South Sudan, which, if you guys don't realize, South Sudan is not exactly a good place. South Sudan is on the border of Sudan, and you're like, I don't know where Sudan is. It's south of Egypt. And if you guys don't know about Sudan, maybe you've heard the word Darfur. That was a very big thing for a very long time. There was a massive genocide there. And if you've ever heard of like the Janjaweed, they were the death squads running around in the desert in the back of Toyota trucks. Well, the Janjaweed eventually became into power, and now they're called the Rapid Security Forces. And they're still doing the thing they're doing in Sudan. And South Sudan got their freedom. They got their independence from Sudan. It's all kind of destabilizing. And you're like, isn't that how African Army works? Kind of. It's kind of, yes, nobody wants to go there for fun. Well, these guys are all getting deported there. Some people are from Vietnam. Some people are in multiple different, where are they? One of these guys is, I believe, some of them are from Central America. There's a lot of people, and they're getting, there's 9 of them. They're getting deported. They're getting sent to South Sudan. And you're like, are they Sudanese? Nope. And they sought an injunction out of the District of Massachusetts, and this is where things kind of started. So on July 3rd, they got an injunction. And the injunction said you can't take any alien to any country not explicitly provided for on their order of removal. So basically, this is kind of like with the Kilmar Abrego Garcia thing. Very in a similar vein, except this time they didn't just take him; they waited. And the issues are the people who are going to South Sudan are alleging things in the Convention Against Torture, the CAT. And that is, if I go there, I'm going to get tortured. I'm going to get abused. They're going to kill me. They're going to abuse me. And you have the right to seek non-deportation to those places. Even if you were from South Sudan, you have the right to say, I don't have to go there. And the U.S. is a signatory to this treaty, to this convention. If the U.S. wasn't a member of it, this wouldn't apply at all. But we are. So that's why it's being brought up at all. So the district court determined the government had violated that injunction by failing to provide the members a meaningful opportunity to assert their claims. And in May, the district court issued an order saying the government can't do this. The government sought a stay of that injunction here. And they say on June 23rd, we stayed that preliminary injunction. And they did. And actually, do I have this in the wrong order?
No, you got it right. I think it's just because you highlighted July 3rd, which is the date of the order you're reading. And it
Sorry.
started
Yeah,
on April 18th.
Yeah, so I know we covered it. God, I grabbed the wrong one. I wanted the original one, and I grabbed
I think you grabbed the most recent one.
I boomered it. I grabbed the two of the same thing, and it's like, wait, no.
But it has a good history here.
Yeah, it has a good history here. So what happened from here, guys, is actually, you know what? We'll just keep going. The Supreme Court said, look, the orders and the injunction are stayed. Well, what happened as soon as that went back to Massachusetts on June 23rd? The day it happened, the district court judge, pulling a Ketanji, channeling Justice Jackson, said that the court's order on remedy remains in full effect and force, notwithstanding today's stay of the preliminary injunction. And he's citing the Supreme Court opinion, and he cites Sotomayor's dissent. So I'm deciding what the law is today. And that's what he just did there. He decided, I am deciding what the law is today. And it remains in full effect and force, notwithstanding today's stay of the injunction. So, and he cites Sotomayor. And this is his idea of the victory here. And he says the remedial orders were not properly before the Supreme Court. And he says, because of that, I don't have to listen to it. And he said, and notice that's what he's citing. Is Justice Sotomayor saying, well, they weren't before us, so it doesn't matter. And he's like, I agree. That's not how this works. It's not how it's supposed to work. And he says,
that's truly remarkable.
Yes.
The idea that the district court decided that the Supreme Court's ruling was essentially not binding on it.
Yes.
And it's the same case.
This is actionally, this is what I meant. And he says, for the avoidance of doubt, and to the extent these are indeed subject to removal, they are included among the individuals referenced. He said, he basically is trying to work around and say, well, this is what I meant all along.
Yeah. And again, there's an important distinction here between the merits issue and kind of the federal court's procedure issue. Like, I think one of the places where the Trump administration has been playing a little fast and loose, and where they need to be very careful that they're not going to get some case law that's going to go the wrong way for them, is about the level of due process given to deportees. This is a technical area. We don't need to deep dive it, but the basic idea is you can deport someone without a criminal trial because deporting them is not a penalty. They're not allowed to be here. You just remove them. You didn't do anything to them. You didn't put them in jail. Yeah. If you're deporting them to a country where they're going to be killed or immediately imprisoned, that sounds a lot more like a penalty. And and the court's going to start ordering you to have more process, which will slow down deportations. So that's a very nuanced area. But that's not this issue. This issue is, if the district court does X and the Supreme Court says, no, you should not do that. And the district court say, well, one of the Supreme Court justices dissented, so I guess it's up to me what to do. Yes. Of course not. And I'm sure we'll get to this, but if you, in the Supreme Court decision, you can kind of see the sanity line in the liberal wing of the court, where Kagan very clearly says, on the merits, I think this is a terrible thing to do. But that doesn't mean that district courts can ignore the majority. That's just not how the system works.
Yes. I mean, and this is where I know people, and I know this is something where if you're trying to encourage people, like, we want the rule of law. Well, remember, Justice Jackson said, like, everybody's bound by the law. And, this judge might say what the law is, but a court above him said, no, it's actually this instead. Are we going to, is this judge have now some sort of God-given authority in the Constitution? He can now buck the Supreme Court? Because if he can just do whatever he wants, then why have a Supreme Court? Now, Jackson would never say that, because she's like anybody, she's power, she's conscious of her own turf and wants to protect it, but that's human nature. So she would say, well, no, that's different. We're in charge. And I would love to, and she explains why she thinks, well, this is different here. But yes, he just did whatever the fuck he wanted. And the Supreme Court goes on To say later that day, however, the district court issued an order stating that the, remedial order remained in effect, notwithstanding our stay of the preliminary injunction. And yes, he basically told the Supreme Court to fuck itself. And if you want, and this is where I want the rule of law to be followed, but if this starts happening and Trump starts just doing whatever the fuck he wants, I'm kind of like, I'm not gonna blame you.
Well,
like at some point, if this starts happening, I'm gonna be like, well, this is you guys did this to yourselves.
So the following sentence is kind of like another legal backslap, right? Where it says
the
only
authority
it cited was the dissent from our stay order. And what the court is doing here is policing its own house. It's saying, hey, district court judge, not only did you ignore us, you didn't even have the decency to find a Supreme Court case that supported your position. All you could cite to was a dissent, which we all know has no legal authority. It's a dissent.
Yes.
So the idea here that a district court has the power to pocket veto the Supreme Court is wild. And the court is correct to take steps to remedy that, because that cannot be allowed.
It has to protect the institution. And it's also just the premise of the rule of law, because if everybody can ignore the Supreme Court, if a district court can ignore the Supreme Court, guess what? I can ignore the Supreme Court. Because if he can do it, well, who the hell is he? I mean, why would I listen to him if he won't listen to the people above him? And that's where, like I said, if this were allowed to happen and nothing stopped it, I would say to Trump, like, okay, yeah, whatever you got to do, man. Fuck these judges. And that's not what we want. I don't want that to happen.
And that's not how judges should behave. I worked for a judge, and I can tell you that, the first question he would ask is there binding precedent? Because if I was in the Second Circuit, so if the Second Circuit or the Supreme Court had decided the issue, it didn't matter what he thought. He's a district court judge. If he is bound by the law of the higher courts in his circuit and in the Supreme Court. So, for a judge to say, I don't care what the courts above me did, is that that's a real tell. This is this new doctrine of judicial maximism where, if we're the good guys, we can do whatever we want. This is a dangerous thing.
And I will say, because I know you mentioned this, you clerked for a federal judge. How pissed off would your judge have been if people ignored his orders?
Oh, yeah.
He would lose his mind over that.
Oh, yeah.
So guess what? I guarantee you, this Judge Murphy would lose his mind if you defied him.
Oh, and he would lose his mind. Let's say there was a question before the court and I had to draft an opinion. If I drafted an opinion and gave it to him and said, I think you should sign this. And he said, well, isn't this completely contrary to binding Supreme Court law? And I said, yeah, but it's right. He would have lost his mind, because he's a district court judge. He doesn't get to tell the Supreme Court what's right. He has discretion when it's not been decided by a superior court. But, a district court judge has to know what the scope of their authority is and where they are limited and where they're bound.
And
that's how the system works.
And it's one thing if this becomes an issue of if there's if this is a legal issue, there's like some case law and it goes back 100 years. That's one thing. This literally just came down for the Supreme Court and said, no, you can't do this. Yeah. That makes it even worse.
And it's not like it's even like about another case and maybe it applies to your case and maybe you can differentiate it. It's exactly your case.
Yes.
Your case went up and they issued an order to you specifically. That's insane.
Yes, and the government moved for a clarifying order, which they don't normally do. I don't think ever really.
It's not normally necessary.
Yeah, it's because we all know what's going on. So they say the motion for clarification is granted, and our preliminary injunction is stayed in full. The remedial order cannot be used to enforce an injunction that our stay is rendered unenforceable. And they say even if we accepted the characterization of the order as a remedy, you can't coerce the government into compliance and would be unenforceable given our stay of the injunction. So if there is no penalty for defying them, you can't enforce it. The relief is done. And they say, despite the dissent's provocative language, and this is once again where they're not saying Sotomayor was wrong. They're just saying we understand Sotomayor was speaking with fire. The claim the lower court has failed to give the effect to an order is properly addressed here. You don't get to do this. You don't get to do this. And this is where they say, assuming as we do, meaning we know you're not going to do what we think you're going to do again.
Mm-hmm.
I think that this is their way, Chad, of saying, and I mentioned this when it happened. This is the Supreme Court's way of saying, look, like maybe you mistyped something there. We think you should probably fire up Word and recheck that. You need to recheck your English there because we think you maybe said I actually will follow the orders, not will not. And they say the district court will now conform its order to our previous stay and enforcing the April 18th injunction through the remedial order. And they say we have no occasion to reach the government's other requests for relief. That's it. They're giving them a chance to as we've seen in these other cases with some of these stay orders. We really think you guys should fix this. I don't really think this is what you meant. Is it really? No, you meant something else, didn't you? And they're hoping he says, well, yeah, I guess I didn't mean that. That's what we thought.
Court tried to get really cute here.
Yeah.
I don't even think we need to get into it because it doesn't really matter. But the district court tried to come up with this kind of splitting hairs argument where you'd say, well, they stayed the injunction, but before they stayed the injunction, the government violated the order. So we're not enforcing the injunction. We're holding the government in contempt for their failure to abide by the order before it was stayed, which is incredible mental gymnastics. And
it's a Reddit argument, as I call it.
Government in contempt for not abiding by an order we stayed. We said that order's not in effect.
Yeah,
so you can't enforce the order now. That's crazy.
And once again, it goes back to the issue of, well, it's a rule of law. Okay, well, we said you don't have the legal authority to do what you did. You don't get to now enforce that on people. That defies the rule of law.
Yeah.
But guess who shows up? Justice Kagan says, look, I would deny the previous stay application. I did. I didn't like it. And I continue to believe it shouldn't have happened. But a majority of this court saw things differently, and I don't get to let a district court do whatever the hell it wants to do. And she acknowledges the institution has to be upheld.
And this is
it's honest.
I have a lot of respect for Kagan for writing this opinion because this is what the rule of law actually looks like.
Yes. I don't like it.
I don't like this, but I recognize that the proper authority has decided the outcome, and I will honor that even though it's not what I would have done.
Yes.
Right? When people ask me about originalism, I often point to Scalia in Texas v. Johnson, where he was the deciding vote on the case that you are protected if you want to burn your own American flag. You have a First Amendment right to do so. And he hates flag burning, and he would have preferred to make it illegal. And his wife was even more conservative than him, and she gave him endless trouble for being the deciding vote to legalize something she found abhorrent. It was against his personal wishes, but he saw that the Constitution mandated it. And I see Kagan doing something that has echoes of that here, where she's saying, this is not what I would have done, but I do think the majority of the Supreme Court gets to say whether or not this injunction was proper. And they did, in fact, decide the injunction was improper. So it has been stayed. And whether or not I like that has nothing to do with whether or not you have to respect the Supreme Court. As you said, the Supreme Court has to protect the institution. And I give her a lot of credit for not joining this dissent.
Yes, but look who joins. Remember, we just heard all about the rule of law and things should be followed. Well, now Justice Jackson is now advocating for a lower court to defy her own authority. Because let's say it was something that she didn't support and she was in the majority, she would not tolerate a lower court defying her at all. But here she is doing this. And it's, we get it. You don't like this. It's bad. You think things are going to happen to these guys in South Sudan, and it really sucks. Okay, great. But this is all Mafiels. This is page after page of Mafiels. It's all it is. It's page after page of Mafiels.
Yeah, well, I mean, because the court already ruled, right? So the you can write all you want here, and by the on the merits, by the way, this is an area where I'm sympathetic to the dissent. Like, I do think that the due process issues that are raised by the current administration's deportation policies are quite serious and could actually bite the administration in the butt down the road.
I think so too.
But that's not the question here, and I think as a lawyer, you're supposed to be able to separate the issues out. And that's what Kagan did. She was able to do it succinctly in a page without having to vent for, 20 pages.
Yeah. And I mean, honestly, I think so too. But I also, run into the issues of, well, what are we going to do with these guys? Since, why can't we send them home? Apparently they're not allowed to go home. Their home doesn't want them.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's like, well, what do you do? I'm like, are you, fine. I guess we're warehousing them in Gitmo till they die because they're not allowed to be here. So what do we do with them?
And you got to come up with, and this is what I meant. I kind of alluded to this with Doge earlier. You need lawyers who will set up a plan that allows for rapid deportations while still documenting the deportations and not creating a punitive deportation that then requires a trial, right?
Yeah,
because and you need good lawyers who can kind of massage that and work it out for you.
And the Abrego Garcia thing, like, fine. Oh, oops, we fucked up. Bring them back. Sorry, that holder's gone. Bye-bye to El Salvador again. Have a nice life. That would have been like, bring them right back. Done. Instead, they jerked around for months on end. They jerked around on that. And
I mean, and some of that is just, I think, playing politics. Like, I think, the president knows what's popular with his base.
Yeah.
But I do think that when you play politics, you run the risk of creating legal rakes to step on.
Yes.
And, this is a big one, if the courts, and I actually have a bet with Pisco about the Alien Enemies Act, where I think that the court will find non-justiciable the question of whether there's been an invasion and whether or not aliens are part of that invasion. But the question of whether a particular person has been afforded sufficient due process, they will pick up.
Well, they've already decided that 9-0 without question. So great.
I haven't won the bet yet because they haven't done the first part. But it's
they telegraph that you get a hearing, you get due process. Like, okay,
and that's critically important because I'm a natural born American citizen. But if somebody thought I wasn't and they arrested me, the only way I could prove I am an American citizen, is through due process. So you can't. Due process is the foundation for every other right.
Yes.
If you don't have due process, you have nothing.
I agree. And I think that's where they're going to, I think Jackson, the way she's done this crazy shit, the court's really going to go hard in the paint to say, it is a completely non-justiciable question, the president using the act. Now, how do you challenge your status under the act? Yeah, you have due process rights. And that's where they've already said that, though. And that's the funny thing. That question's already been decided. So step one is really just, can we decide if he's allowed to do it? Well, he's allowed to do it. And then we've already decided the second question. So I agree with you. I think it's a non-justiciable question.
To me, it's obviously like, okay, the Alien Enemies Act is predicated on invasion. And there's a couple invasion type scenarios, right?
Yeah.
And the people who say that the court should decide whether there is an invasion are basically saying they don't believe President Trump, so they think it's a sham, and the court should look past his pretenses. But when you're talking about a law about invasion, can you imagine enemy boats are landing in Manhattan?
Yeah,
the president orders up the militia, and a district court says, "Hold on, before you can order the militia to repel the invaders, we need to have a hearing to determine whether or not this is an invasion."
Yeah.
It's obvious that judges are not the branch that decides when it's an invasion. That's clearly the president.
Yes. And ultimately, it's like, well, I don't think these guys are an invasion. They're heckin' nice people. No, the president has made a determination, and if there's problems with that, there's other checks and balances to go deal with it.
Oh,
There's other ways to handle it.
The Alien Enemies Act is a hideously outdated law that should be replaced with something more modern if we had Congress that could actually pass laws, which we kind of barely do. I don't like that law. The fact that I don't like that law does not mean it's not binding.
Yeah,
it is the law.
Once
it's
again,
not,
you have to.
It's not my job to like it or not.
How rule of law are you? You are either in or you're out. You can't halfway. You can't halfway the rule of law. And this is kind of we're almost to the fever pitch of the this, as I like to call it, this judicial coup, and this, even though there's a website, Legal Insurrection, and it's right leaning. This is a legal insurrection because guess what happened? All these people in the DVD case, they went to the DC District Court and tried to get a habeas petition going. And I think this is sanctionable conduct at the end of the day, because we already have all these other cases saying you can actually, because they're in Djibouti, this actually probably is the place. Well, they were already in Massachusetts, so I think that's clear. They think the jurisdiction was Massachusetts for these people. So that's where the habeas petition should have been filed. But they clearly knew they were going to get told, go back to Massachusetts. I think this is like sanctionable conduct because they filed it here and the district court in DC was like, no, go back to Massachusetts. I can't do anything here. All I can do is give you a stay for a couple of hours. And that's normal in cases where you filed maybe in not the right venue. We'll give you a stay to be fair about it. So they got a couple hours stay on things, but these guys jerked it around again. And they went fishing to try to find a judge who was going to bite, I think.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what the venue and jurisdictional rules for habeas petitions are. So I don't know how colorable their argument was for that they could file in DC.
We've had a bunch of that. So we've had a bunch of that so far in these cases, though, where like with the Alien Enemies Act and some of these deportation cases, you file habeas in the district where this is all happening. Now, remember, there was the lamentations about, well, if you get a habeas petition in the Fifth Circuit, you're screwed. And it's like, okay, yeah, you probably are. As you stated, you're not going to probably find a judge in, the Northern District of Texas who's probably going to back you up on it.
Yeah, and because I don't know this area of the law, and it sounds like you know more than I do, if you're arrested, let's say, in Maryland, and then you're moved to a facility in Tennessee, is the appropriate place Tennessee or Maryland?
I think it becomes Tennessee, but I think in this situation, because they're in Djibouti, I think the argument they were trying to make, but clearly the entire case itself was already pending in Massachusetts. So I think that they're kind of, because even the DC court's like, yeah, we can't do this. Go to Massachusetts. So they try this, and they try for this petition like this, and it's just, I think this was all just bullshit garbage stuff, because ultimately they ended up over the weekend going to South Sudan. They were finally turned over to South Sudan. And that's kind of the saga there for these guys.
Okay, that makes sense, because if they were being held offshore,
yes,
the natural district would be DDC.
Yes,
absent the other litigation. But if you've already been litigating in Maryland or Massachusetts all this time, then why would you suddenly show up in a new court? The other weird thing about this, the other thing that strikes me as strange in terms of like the tactics, the judge in Massachusetts is obviously hugely sympathetic to you.
Yeah.
So you're not shopping for a new judge. I think what they were shopping for was a judge who had not been chastised by the Supreme Court recently.
You think this was their way of saying they want to find somebody who would help him? And guys, if you don't know where South Sudan is, I know not everybody liked wearing the World's Carmen San Diego. Here is South Sudan.
That's a rough place to be.
Here is Djibouti. Yes, and as I said, guys, it's the Horn of Africa. Yeah, it's South Sudan. It's like Sudan is not a nice place, and yeah, I mean here is Darfur, and it's not very good in Darfur right now. It's a very bad place. South Sudan's not much better. I would not want to go there. Although to be fair, I wouldn't want to go to South Sudan. I wouldn't want to go to the Central African Republic right now. You know, Ethiopia, like it's a little more stable, but like I wouldn't want to go down here to the Congo because like these guys in Uganda are kind of having a bit of a brush war. Like there's a lot of places I wouldn't want to go in, Central Africa right now.
Yeah, and keep in mind, like when we're talking about these legal issues, this is not an endorsement necessarily
Mhm,
of the deportations themselves.
mhm.
As we said, the due process issues there are totally different than the question, which is, I think, totally clear: does a district court have to follow a Supreme Court order? And
Yeah.
and that's the kind of the heart of it, which is, if a
Mhm,
court finds something objectionable morally, are
mhm,
they empowered to take any extraordinary steps they want to remedy that?
mhm,
Or are they bound by the system of laws like any other branch?
mhm.
And
Yeah.
this doctrine of judicial maximism is dangerous precisely because it says if your intentions are good, you have no limits.
Yeah. And I mean, and that's where Jackson says that. I'm like, do you want Clarence Thomas deciding what he thinks is good? Because there's a lot of things he would change if he had his way. He comments on it all the time. If I had my way, I
Yeah.
mean, he's told us what he wants to do, and a lot of it sounds really good to me. It'd be very interesting. It'd be very, very interesting in that regard.
Yeah, he's
So,
his school of originalism requires that you go back and reinvent the wheel every time. You have
yes.
to you have to go back to first principles in every case. Um, I I think the reason that he's even a minority within the originalist wing
Hmm.
is that's just not a practical way to run the judiciary.
Yes.
Imagine if every time a case came before the court, you had to go, well, okay, that's a very interesting theory you have there, counsel. But can the court even decide what law is constitutional? I mean, sure, you're citing Marbury versus Madison.
Yes.
Was that case even right? Let's
Hmm.
go back and do first principles. You
Yes.
can't do it every time. The law has
Yes.
to build on itself.
No,
So
and I agree.
there are some cases I disagree with. I think I might have voted another way if I was on the Supreme Court, but
Hmm.
they're the law, and you have to live with that. There are
Yes.
exceptions. There are cases that are so egregiously wrongly decided that
Hmm.
something has to be done about them. Roe
Hmm.
and Casey fell into that category,
Yes.
but most of the cases that I think were wrong aren't going to be overturned, and probably shouldn't.
Hmm.
Like I know the one that kills me. I think it's Wicker versus Filbert. It's the
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
non-lawyers. It's the case that says,
Another Ohio man.
yeah, the government is supposed to only have the power over interstate commerce, the federal government. And in
Okay.
that case, the court decided that if a local farmer is doing something on his land without selling to anyone outside the state, but the impact of his actions within the state are felt in other states tangentially,
Hmm.
the federal government has the power to
Yes.
intervene,
By
which
not being in, yeah, by not being involved in interstate commerce, you are involved in interstate commerce.
yeah, it's that's a to me that's a wild overstep.
Hmm.
But if I would have voted differently, but it's also
Hmm.
settled law and the whole country's been built on it for decades. It's
Yeah,
not
and
going away.
that's part of originalism too. Is like, look, we can't really like. There are some times where we have to undo things, but this is not one of them we're gonna undo.
Yeah, I mean the truth is the law requires stability. When people go to court, they need to know what the law is and that the law is fair and it's going to be the same as it was yesterday until
Mhm.
Congress changes it.
Yeah.
So when the court overrules itself, that's very destabilizing to the rule of law.
Hmm.
You really don't want to do that unless you have to.
Yeah.
A settled case should be respected unless there really isn't an alternative. And some cases were just decided so wrongly that like Plessy v. Ferguson.
Yeah.
It's like there are some cases that are just so bad you kind
Yeah.
of have to do something about it.
Yeah.
And
Or like Roe, we kind of have to fix this.
yeah, it just some things just aren't going to work. But most of the time, it's water under the bridge, and you move forward.
Hmm. Yeah, no, I very much agree. And I like I said, I do agree with you. This is not, these cases aren't the issues of whether or not these guys have properly been afforded things, or what do we do with people who are in these third party countries. Those are great questions we could argue, but that's not the hill these attorneys chose to die on. They fought on the injunction hill for some reason. And
yeah, and this is what, I mean, this is what Justice Kagan was saying. Like, she disagrees.
Mhm.
There was already a case on that. The majority already ruled on that.
Mhm.
So that legal issue was heard. She thinks it was wrongly decided, and that's fair enough. She's a Supreme Court justice. She is
Mhm.
more than entitled. She is constitutionally required to have her opinion. So
Yeah.
that's totally fine that she disagrees.
Mhm.
But her disagreement is not reason that a court gets to ignore the majority. Clearly.
Yes, very true, very true. Well, Ryan, I mean, that's it for tonight. I think we're all caught up on everything. Do you have anything you'd like to, parting shot wise, anything like that?
Sean, it's been an absolute pleasure. I hope we can do this again sometime.
Look forward to it.
For your audience, you can find me at X, Ryan C. Mullally, and hopefully start recording these conversations and putting them up at Natural Law on YouTube. I'm a bit of a Luddite, so we'll see whether my technological chops are going to match, my words tonight. But hopefully, you can find me there too.
I'm looking for Natural Law on YouTube. How do you spell out all that?
I have no content posted, so you won't be able to find it.
Oh, okay. Well, there we go. That helps.
Yeah.
So I was trying to find it earlier because I'm like, Natural Law. I'm like, yeah, there's all kinds of shit on Natural Law, but not the channel Natural Law.
Yeah, I am hopeful that I will figure out how to actually post things, and then there'll be content there. Okay. But if you're looking now, you're going to be disappointed.
All right, hold on. I gotta show you something. Apparently, Chad wants it. Hey, Clyde, come here, buddy. Come here, Clyde. Come on, buddy. Come here. Come on. Come on. Hey, come here. Hi. All right. Apparently, you got to see him. So here, this is Clyde. He's the real brains of the show. He's the one who told me to reach out to you. So
I'll take the recommendation. This is how legal recommendations get done.
Yes, it is. It is. Yes, it is. So yeah, if you're all set, Ryan, you can stick around. I was going to go through the super chats and some of the comments real quick, but you are, if you want to take off, that's great. I understand.
Yeah, it's getting a little late for me, but it's been an absolute pleasure, and I hope we can do it again sometime.
Sure. Look forward to it. Guys, Ryan Mullally, you guys can find him over on Twitter and hopefully here on YouTube soon. So thank you again, Ryan. Yep.
Bye.
Bye. All right, guys, that was great. That was a lot of fun. What do you think, Papa Bear? Huh? Did you have fun? Did you listen? Oh, you want some scritches? And he's like, yes, please, fat man. Best co-host ever. Mwah. You guys like Ryan? I do too. That was very fun. I hope to have him on in the future. I think that'll be great. Okay, chat. So 2.0, because my birthday's about a month away now. She's like, well, I got you a bunch of stuff. And she's like, I got you presents for like a bunch of days. And I was like, what? And she's like, I didn't really like get you presents. I ordered stuff on Amazon. So it's like today she got stuff and I have to check it out and see what it is. So here we go, chat. It is it's a shirt. One of the things she got me today. So it's like, I was like, are you going to include like buying me underwear or something? And she's like, well, maybe. So, and another shirt, chat. And what else we got here? And a pair of shorts. 2 pairs of shorts. There we go. So we're all set. So we got some. Thank you, sweetheart. Oh, thank you, baby. 2.0. Thank you. Love you. What? There's a tie in there? Oh. Oh, okay. Yeah, there is a tie. Woo! There is a tie, chat. That's nice. It's got like a hanky pattern on it. There's a tie, chat. That's pretty cool looking. I like that. It's a tie. So there we go. There we go. That'll be perfect. Model them, you ho. You don't have enough subs for that, chat. So. All right, guys, we can catch up on some things here. Jacob Turner says, best channel to watch, learn, and work at the same time. Well, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. Stephen Cooper says, I prefer to think of chat as purgatory. Well, thanks. The Shugi Show says, late because forgot something was happening. Well, you're here now. That's all that matters. Nick Kreuzer, who's been a member for 15 months. Thank you for that kind of support. Says, we're good as building the towers as the Taliban. Well, the Taliban's good at taking them down. Let me tell you what. Stephen Cooper gifting 5 subs, chat. Let's go. And remember, chat, when you either join up yourself or you get somebody some memberships and subs, you are literally just crushing those grays out. That's what it looks like. That's what it looks like when you crush the grays. That's what it looks like when you're doing that. So, Steven, thank you for the support, your generosity. I appreciate the support so much, you guys. So, big support there. Thank you. Johan Naxos for $5 says, we need to start electing people Running Man style. If you can survive the gauntlet, you can serve. That would reveal some interesting things there. That would reveal some interesting things. Yes. Philip Kogan's been a member for 8 months. Thank you for being here for that long. It says bad precedent takes at least 70 years to clear. Yeah, that's the problem. Like, it takes a long time for a shitty ruling to get overturned because it takes that long for people to go, wow, yeah, this was kind of bad. We really need to fix it. Roe is a little different, but yeah, Roe was pretty close. Roe took a long time in hindsight. Hella, excited utterance. Hella, how you doing? Hope you're doing well. Hella, friend of the show. Says Scalia's dissent sounds like an opera. Well, remember, it's dissent. D-I-S-S-E-N-T. But yes. T-Rex Trucking and More for $9.99. $9.99. Says, with the Oberfeld decision, I do agree that the valid contrast made in one state should be recognized in all 50, but at the same time, how do we jump to therefore all states must issue gay marriage? Well, once again, yeah, that's the issue, man. That is the issue here. How do you square those circles? I don't know the answer to all that. There might be better people than me to figure that out. So, but thank you for the super chat. And guys, I apologize. Normally I try to do the super chats as we're going, but we were kind of just in a groove there. So I kind of, sorry. You got Safa on that one. Scarlet Series has become a YouTube member. Well, thank you for that support, Scarlet. Thank you for being here. I appreciate it so very much. You guys are new. If you guys are a member, we do stuff on Wednesdays, members only. Get to hang out, have fun, and kind of talk about stuff that's like not normally like legal related necessarily, and have a little bit more fun. So thank you so much for your support. I appreciate it. Base Shaman for $10 says, Jackson doesn't care which branch has absolute authority. She thinks she has the absolute authority. If she was in Congress, she would say Congress has the absolute authority. And that's true. There's a lot of people in Congress who think they have the absolute authority. But Congress is so diffuse and so discombobulated, it doesn't matter that she would think that. So the scary part is she's in one of the limited positions where she has the ability to try to shape that issue. Base Shaman for $5 says, let's cut the shit. They are communists. These people have a very, very well documented history of using immigration to uproot rebellious populations. I do agree that is a very common leftist tactic. And yeah, I mean, yeah. Yes, the Great Replacement is not a made-up thing. Then EDW Raptor says, this was a great bromance. Well, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. I've been stupidly busy and haven't been able to watch recently. How do you feel about the Epstein situation? I mean, it's like multiple things at once. Like Bondi and Cash. I mean, are they shills? Are they just morons? Like, did they get outmaneuvered by the FBI? Is there nothing there? mean, there's a million different ways to go with this. The footage that's out there right now, we've seen now that got released where there's a minute missing out of it. And then the pictures of Epstein all fucked up on the stretcher. Like, none of it makes sense one way or another. I mean, there's so many issues with this. Was this handled really fucking poorly? 100%. But that's, like I said, Trump administration, like that's kind of normal for things here. And it doesn't help that Pam Bondi's a fucking idiot. And Kash Patel, immediately became FBI director and started sucking FBI dick. It doesn't make me feel any better about these things. Like, I don't know what to think at this point. I'm discombobulated, is what I'm going to say. But yeah, I guess I'll happily wear the Fell for It Again award right now. Fell for it again. But the idea that it's like, oh, well, it's done. Sorry, that's it. It's like, okay, that doesn't make any fucking sense at all. So, is there a long game here? No. No. I don't think there's a long game. Was all that cooming over Patel for nothing? Yes. Yes, it was. Yep. It was. Like I told you guys, I'm not afraid to admit it. Yep. But I mean, we saw the video of him hanging out with the hostage rescue team. I'm like, well, he's fucking sold out. So once again, fell for it again. Mystery Sniper's been a member for 20 months. Thank you for that support. Says a Supreme Court decision is a lawful law, Sean. Is it? Is it, Sean? Yes, it is. Anna Walt says they got threatened. I don't know about that. I mean, maybe, but they're also just fucking scumbags. And Pam Bondi's an idiot, so who knows? Joe's saying the SDNY hit all the evidence before the FBI crew got on there. I guess. I mean, like, you could say that, but like, I mean, like that now you're getting into like fucking Blue Anon territory. Like, oh, it's all there. You just got to wait. Well, like, they hit it, but that's what happens. Like, I mean, like I said, I'm discombobulated over the whole fucking thing. Yeah, nobody's asking for the CP. We asked for the files, and we know the files exist. It was always a campaign lie because DeSantis released the Florida Epstein files and vowed to release the federal files. Yeah, but you know what? I mean, I don't know if he would have been able to get much further at this point. So, yeah, the H-1B FBI director. Yep. Always blackpilling. How's the war with Iran going? Well, we haven't done a whole lot more, so good for now. Ag Biochemist been a member for 27 months. Thank you for that support, man. Says, does Ryan know who Darkside Phil is? Also, is he Darkside Phil's dad? I don't know if he does. I'll ask him for you, chat. I'll message him. Yeah, Biden released more Epstein material than Trump. Let that sink in. Yeah. Yes, and yeah, this was phase 1, was releasing shit we already had. Yeah, where's phase 2? Where's phase whatever? We don't have it anymore, so what the fuck? Yeah, Bondi, Bogino, and Patel, a 3-cuck ring circus. Yeah, that's, I never liked Dan Bongino, though. He's all right. He's annoyed the shit out of me. So. And now we're getting amnesty. Everybody calling amnesty. Yeah, I know. As long as the big business guys are like, hey, we need our heckin' illegals, Trump's like, all right, fine. So yeah, there's going to be a lot of amnesties, and they won't be called amnesties. So, like I said, guys, haven't been impressed, and I told Pisco that. I have not been fucking impressed with a lot. Just like Ryan, I'm willing to be honest about it. I'm not going to tell you everything's good to go. Someone Trap says, come on, Sean, things will get better in about 2 weeks. Yeah, 2 more weeks, chat. President-elect Phil Swift has been a member for 18 months. Thank you, Phil, for that support. Says, oh, I'm going to come. Don't come. Don't come. Tech Guy South says, yes, the evil arm of the government, the FBI's hostage rescue team. They are fucking evil. They've murdered people. Never got held accountable for it. So, trust the plan. The Patriots are in control. Okay. I need to meet a younger Ghislaine. That's a very concerning quote, Bob. You might want to delete this. So. Oh. Yeah, so many victims. That's what I mean. That's part of the issue. Like, I don't believe that Jeffrey Epstein just fucking molested all these people on his own, raped all these little kids on his own. It doesn't make any sense. And then also, why is it just Ghislaine Maxwell being in trouble? Like, all the other people on his fucking islands, no one else got arrested or charged. They just didn't know what's happening. Bullshit. Like, there's so much of this that doesn't work and doesn't make sense. Why nobody else has been charged blows my fucking mind. Yeah. So, if you're mad at those three, your anger is misplaced. I'm mad at them. I'm mad at them because they've been part of it. You know, they're not coming out and saying, well, we got fucking hoodwinked too. So they're going to carry the blame till they step up. Yeah, where we go one, we go all. Oh my God. Yeah, nothing ever happens o'clock. Nothing ever happens o'clock. Oh. Does it blow your mind? I mean, a little bit. A little bit. Yes. Bondi says a list on my desk. There's also no list. Well, Bondi's always been a retard, so there you go. It's so depressing. Plus Ukraine, I know. And I'm more pissed off about the goddamn Ukraine thing. We're going to have to give Ukraine more weapons. Fuck! Well, there's going to be no excuse for the whole holes now. Yeah, I mean, taco is correct. It really is a taco thing. Trump always chickens out. Yeah, sadly. Base Shaman is saying, though, the cover-up is always a distraction from asking who ordered the cover-up. I mean, okay, well, like, you got to, like, put the strings together, because I don't know. Yeah. Oh, Pray times 12 is, yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah, second course tacos. It's Taco Tuesday. Well, it is Tuesday, so it is Taco Tuesday. Or no, today's Monday. Isn't today Monday? No, today is Tuesday. Damn. So, do you think this is why they kept Matt Gaetz out? No. It's because he was a threat to their power. Like, they didn't want him in, so he probably pissed off Trump or somebody in the administration, and they boxed him out. Kind of like what happened with Vivek. Vivek and Elon had a power struggle. Vivek lost. Now, Trump and Elon had a power struggle, and Elon lost. And, yeah, Matt Gaetz probably overplayed his hand. So there you go. Bad Petunia, thank you for being here. I don't think I've seen you before, but thank you for being here. Turns out Trump and his administration are all deep state operatives too. I mean, I don't know, man, but it's just like they haven't found a cock they aren't willing to suck. So, yeah, this is just. So, I think the Trump Musk feud is fake. Oh, no, I don't think it is. I don't think this is fake. No. Elon had a spurg out. Like, that is 100% real. That is 100% real. I can guarantee you that much, chat. Trump was always swamped. This outsider shit was a lie. He's been in politics for 50 years. Yeah. Trump once says, I pray Ohio doesn't elect Slumdog Millionaire. Well, who's gonna oppose him? Dave Yost tried, and I backed him, and that didn't work. So, yeah, we're gonna Ohio is going to get redeemed, sir. We are going to get butt fucked by H-1B visas like no tomorrow. Let me tell you what. We are going to get butt fucked with those so hard. So hard. They're going to, it's going to be worse than fucking having Californians move in. Oh, Clyde versus Vivek. Yeah, well. Yeah. Yeah, I know. We're not playing 23-dimensional chess as Candyland. At least if there's shoots and ladders. Well, it's more like shoots and ladders right now, chat. And we just keep falling down the chute, and there are no ladders. It's just shoots and ladders, and it's just every time you move, shoot. Every time you move, shoot. So, the streets were run brown with poo. Oh my god, it'll be bad. Didn't Alaska have a dog or a cat as mayor in one of its towns? Yes. And I believe in Clyde for Ohio. Well, how can you not believe it? Such a good little doggo. Look at him. He's such a good little boy. He's such a good boy. He sells Clyde coin too. But yeah, I don't think Clyde's going to work out, chat. I don't think it'll work out. Yes, eventually we shoot so much we're into hell. Yes. Yes, shoot in French does mean accident. It does, yes. Oh. The moon will be Clyde's. Yes, that's his. The stars are Clyde's birthright. To the stars, chat. We shall build a new empire in the stars. Stacy says he'll accept peen bribes. Well, I mean, maybe. I mean, we that said though, we tried a new kind of peens with him. They're like a little softer, and he's been chewing the shit out of them. And now he won't eat the hard ones anymore. So Clyde is like, yeah, things are getting a little different for Clyde out there. You already have an Indian boss based in Columbus. I don't need anymore. Well, like to say it's not going to happen, but oh god, no! Oh shit, we're fucked. We are fucked in Ohio. So, David Davis has been a member for 9 months. Thank you, David. I'm only here in the hopes of seeing Clyde. Well, go back a couple minutes so you see him when Ryan left. He was on screen. Now Clyde's hanging out with 2.0 again. I don't know if he'll come back in. So whole rules is if you go by annual funding, it's Euro trash Ukraine. Well, no, it's Israel. And I know you guys don't like it when I talk about Israel, but they are in charge. So suffer. Oh. So sad. Depressing. Oh, chat. So I don't know what to tell you. Watching judicial L's rack up though is fun, and watching these guys get deported, as long as they got due process, they cause crimes in America. Have fun in fucking South Sudan. Maybe there's a reason why you're not allowed back, and maybe we don't want you anymore. So, yeah. So, with that said, chat, we're gonna wrap this up for tonight. Tomorrow, like I said, chat, we have a schedule. We did a schedule. Isn't that crazy? So we are going to cover the Streamlight versus Harbor Freight lawsuit, which is kind of fun. Depending on if we have some time, we'll be covering, maybe talk about what's going on with Surefire and who they're suing. And then this weekend, we may be having a special guest about what's coming on about this weekend. Maybe some fun stuff here. Hoping we can have him on. And yes, Grockwin full Austrian painter, which is hilarious. Cover the Proven lawsuit. Is that the one Runkle's been covering? We'll take a look at that with the locks. Runkle's trying to get some stuff he's trying to get some documents out of that one. So I should have worn that Harbor Freight shirt tomorrow. Yeah. So with that said, chat, I will see you guys tomorrow. And remember, until next time, just because you did it does not mean you're guilty. It really doesn't. It really doesn't mean you're guilty, chat. So, is a special guest Laney? No. I mean, he's not the special guest. But good night, chat.
Weapons, blacksmithing, and models of planes, esoteric works, and even some trains. Much merriment had while drinking White Claws, tips on hunting, and even talking the law. Whatever you do, just don't talk to cops, even when they nab you on illegal stops. Just 'cause you did it doesn't mean you're guilty, but please talk to a local attorney. Was that the fat guy?